Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the council meeting of the 20th of June 2023. I declare the meeting open at 6 p.m. Just like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past and present. Apologies or members on leave of absence. We do have apologies from Councillor Ashley Wallace this evening due to family responsibilities. So that takes us to public question time and receiving of public statements. So community members, welcome to the council meeting. I know that many of you are very familiar with the process, but if there is anyone who hasn't been here before, we welcome you to the microphone to speak to us. We do ask that you state your name, the suburbs that you reside in or work in if you're here representing an applicant, and the item number that you're speaking to, and we do time to 3 minutes. So there's no set order, it's just whoever would like to come to the microphone first. So open to you for your comments. Thank you. First speaker, yes, come forward.
Before I start, can I just ask that everyone who's opposed to 80 Auckland Street just quickly stand up so it gives the councillors a bit of a feel for what's here, because not everybody's going to talk and hold you up. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I'm here to address item 9.1 on the agenda. My name is Judith Burrows and I live at 70 Auckland Street, North Perth. First, and without any question or doubt, this development does not meet the built form policy or R codes applied to this parcel of land, and in no way complies with the bulk or scale that should be applied to it. Whilst this does meet the minimum R20 lot size, the reason the property took 6 years to be sold was due to the irregular shape. REWA demands that their representatives give full disclosure when selling, so buying from the owner unfortunately has left them in this predicament, as with 31 Gill Street. This is not the fault of the council, nor the fault of the residents in the area, and definitely not council's problem to resolve, as I was told it was. If the planners informed Riverstone as stated in last Tuesday, then this needs to be investigated. As I have said previously, you either build to meet the requirements of the land purchased, or you buy land that can fit your dream home. It really is that simple. This onus is on the new owners, no one else. We are not responsible for their decisions, and as ratepayers, our money should not be spent wasting time on trying to accommodate this. As a side note, I think the planners should be reminded of who pays their wages. I ask
Judith, just respectfully, if you could keep to the planning matters of this item, that would be grateful. I'd be very grateful.
Well,
Thank you.
Yeah. I ask all of you to stop this dishonouring and betrayal of the commitments made to the residents in this area and instead change it to honouring, supporting and enforcing the R20 coding that was the result of 18 years of hard work put in by residents and council and finally enacted by the state government planning in 2018. We worked hard, jumping through and meeting all the red tape requirements just to get the first amendment to council in order to start the process of changing the R codes back to R20, which is what they were when I purchased my home 31 years ago. You cannot just turn up and say, this is what I want. It takes a lot of work. Please make sure your planners respect and align themselves with this small pocket of Vincent by ensuring any applicant is fully aware of these requirements right from the start. And I think others would be happy, if necessary, to concede this Vincent built form policy, which is even more restrictive. But the R20 is the baseline for building in this area. The original plan for this lot was a single level 3-bedroom modest home with concessions apparently given by neighbours. So it is disingenuous to say it cannot be built on or that neighbours are trying to stop any building on this property. It can be done.
Thank you very much, Judith. Well timed. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor Cole and councillors. My name is David Hunter. I'm representing my wife and I in opposition to 80 Auckland Street and the proposed bill put forward by the applicant Riverstone. We are the owners of 31 Gill Street, which is directly to the north of 80 Auckland Street, and we are directly impacted by this proposal. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of those who attended site for community discussion pertaining to the impact of those proposed plans over recent weeks. As you could tell by attendance and sentiment, there is considerable objection to the proposed plan in its current state. The Auckland and Gill Street residents are passionate about protecting their community streetscape, amenity, and way of life. They have been fighting for 20 years to protect this. This will be showcased this evening from all those sitting behind me who will stand up and tell you why. Interestingly, my wife and I had the opportunity to buy 80 Auckland Street some years ago, but following proper due diligence and investigation, the parcel of land was not appropriate for the size and style of house we wanted to build. There would be limitations for what we wanted to build in respect to regulation and design. We passed on that opportunity, eventually purchasing 31 Gill Street, which was far more suited to our needs and better suited for a larger home. We designed a build using subject matter experts to guide us. Further to this, we approached any neighbours who could have been negatively impacted by our build to gauge feedback and adapt accordingly. This was the right thing to do as far as we were concerned. However, your decision tonight is not based on decency, neighbourly conduct, and reciprocity. Your decision will be determined by facts. So here are some facts. 31 Gill Street, our block, is a corner block that adheres to first floor setbacks. 80 Auckland Street does not. This particular regulation was reiterated to us by planning during our design phase. In fact, there is a portion of our design that is 8.5 meters behind the ground floor. What's good for one is good for another. There are well-documented issues pertaining to bulk and scale for 80 Auckland, as noted by the DRP chairperson and the plethora of submissions objecting this proposal, yet planning recommends approval without any substantial changes. There are a number of people who are affected by this. As testament tonight, you can see who's attended. Why has 80 Auckland Street been given such generous concessions on the first floor setbacks, particularly when the ground floor has been given such generous concessions too? This proposal is now reliant on council discretion, so I implore you to balance your decision against all facts that you have at your disposal. There is a long history with this block, and we still await the outcome of our inquiry into historical approvals and timeframes for 80 Auckland Street. Given this, we ask that at the very least you defer this proposal, pending substantial changes to that design that will proportionately balance the home on the block size, satisfying the wide range of issues presented to you all this evening. Or if deemed appropriate, refuse the application and what has been presented to you over the course of the last 2 weeks. Thank you for your consideration and time.
Thank you, David. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor Cole and councillors. I live in Sassav, Mount Hawthorn, and have a major asset of the City of Vincent running under and through my property. It's a large stormwater pipe which has been neglected by the City of Vincent. In response to my questions raised in the May Council meeting, governance advised year to date 2022-23, City of Vincent had paid a premium of over $1,070,000 to the local government insurance scheme. Question: what is the amount of the sum insured for this $1 million insurance premium? Question 2, I'd like to know what the number of claims made and for what amount against the number of claims paid out and for what amount for the following years, 2021, 21-22 and year to date 2022-2023. Also, last year, LGIS, the Local Government Insurance Scheme, distributed $6 million, the largest dividend distribution since the commencement of the scheme. How much did the City of Vincent receive as a dividend from this local government insurance scheme last year? Question 4. I'd like to know who is ultimately responsible for the City of Vincent record keeping. Question 5. Whose function is it to ensure that records and documents are kept and accurately maintained? Question 6. I'd like to know how many landowners have paid to connect to the City of Vincent stormwater drainage system over the last 5 years. How many for Mount Hawthorn and how many for the whole of the City of Vincent? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Leslie. We'll ensure you get answers through administration on those questions. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Ashley LaFontaine from North Perth. Speaking on items 11.5 and 12.3. With a carryover of $4.5 million for the 22-23 financial year, I asked what priority is given to implement carryover projects. My query comes because of the Norfolk Street Safe Active Street. It took 3 capital works budgets, 2020, 21, 2021, 22, and 22-23 to complete the stage 1 design only. Since the first consultation in May 2022, no update has been provided to the community. Has the Norfolk Safe Active Street project been dropped? Have the funds for this project been reallocated to another project? If so, which one? I ask these questions because I don't see it under the capital works budgets. On item 11.6, a year ago, due to the city having maxed out its borrowing capacity, all ratepayers through annual rates were forced to top up the underground power reserve sold to us to enable us to access longer payback periods. The service had now become conditional. This condition was non-existent when the 2.1% levy was placed on ratepayers for underground power. We now find that the money raised will exclude 30% of ratepayers who received the imposition. Let me state clearly that I am not opposing prioritising ratepayers who are experiencing financial hardship. However, these conditions imposed after the charge are unfair and pose additional financial stress to those who cannot access the service they have contributed towards. A funding model with an extended period could enable all ratepayers who contributed to the reserve to access the service, except, of course, those in Highgate East. In fairness and in ensuring equity for all, the period of accessibility should be extended. Ratepayers in the Highgate East Underground Power Project area paid upfront or elected for longer payback periods with a per annum interest rate applied to their loan. My motion at the AGM was specific in asking that those who had already paid for their underground power be returned the 2.1% additional charge on their 21-22 rates. The residents in Highgate are aggrieved that they are paying twice for underground power. I think it is proper and incumbent on council to return the 2.1%, as it is an imposition on these Highgate residents, especially now many are stressing to meet increases in the cost of living. I seek a direct response to this proposal, as I have not received one that addresses a refund to the double charged residents. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. We'll come to that when we come to underground power. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and administration and ratepayers in the gallery. My name is Greg Johnson. I'm a small businessman in the city of Vincent in Mount Hawthorn, and I've been trading in that area for 70 years. The item tonight I want to raise is 11.5. And firstly, I'd like to congratulate Emma Cole, the Mayor, for proposing that the motion not be approved. That is the motion that was put by the administration in respect of imposing a $2 parking fee. Now, it's a very sensible and common sense approach to this. $2 is negligible, but it's very inconvenient for people and raises very, very little revenue. Why would you do it? And so I'm so pleased that Mayor Cole has acknowledged this in this motion. I'm also very pleased that that's been supported by Ross Iopolo, Councillor Ross Iopolo. He's seen the same way to do the approach to this sort of situation. So having said that, I'd like to say this. I wish the same approach could be taken in Leederville, where the proposal is to continue on, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the inconvenience and the irrelevant amount of money that will be collected, to continue on with the $1 first hour fee. I'd like to see the council have the same approach that they've had in the Brisbane area, Brisbane Street area, for $2 and have that rescission back to what it formerly was. So that's what I'd like to see, and that's what I'm asking the council to do. The second question, and I've got not a lot of time to ask this, is there's a proposal also relating to the same item 5, as to the budget. There's a proposal for us to have a 4.5% rate imposed upon us by the council. The counter proposal that is put by Councillor Ross Iopolo. It acknowledges the stress that the ratepayers are going through in Vincent, and they're no different from anywhere else. And the proposal is to go back to a more conservative 3%. It's a very good proposal, and it's founded on very, very good reasons. We are not Peppermint Grove. We don't have highly paid wealthy people in our suburb. We have modest people, and 4.5% is excessive. Last year it was 7.6%. I mean, the combination of both these is excessive. So the proposal I would seek from the councillors is to assist the ratepayers and understand their circumstances. Thank you very much. Please consider the 3%, not the 4.5%. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Greg. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I'm Tristan Marshall of 29 Gill Street, North Perth, and I'm addressing 9.1 agenda item. My opposition to 80 Auckland Street was initially about the amenity and the walkability of the neighbourhood. It's a very community-minded area with people actually know each other quite well. It doesn't interact with the street on a great way. I've agreed to the 2 previous building plans that have been presented previously, a single story and then a modest 2-story. So I'm not opposed to development on the site. We've mentioned bulk and scale. I'm now concerned about the bulk and scale, as in the applicant's own words, I live on the dead side of the property. The dead side of the house, and that's this side of the house, is not visible from the street or to any neighbours, is only visible from the backyard of one house. Yes, it's visible from my backyard, from my balcony, from 3 rooms of my house. There seems to be quite a lot of advantages being taken by the proposals, and as you can see, we've got quite a few people here, and we strongly disagree with the development. Thank you.
Thanks, Tristan. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Hakin and I'm in North Perth. So I live on 78 Auckland Street, which is at the southern end of 80 Auckland Street, which is the development that I'm talking about today. The biggest overshadowing effect for us isn't at midday as used in the assessment. It starts at midday and gets worse as the day progresses. For nearly 100 years, the families living in my home have been warmed by direct winter sun heating its northern facing walls. They've enjoyed the low angled winter light flooding into the lead light windows and brightening the living room, dining room and kitchen. If these plans were approved, this will be gone forever. And my house will be plunged into darkness every winter's afternoon. Max and Sophie will be eating their afternoon tea and doing their homework with the lights on and the heating on because of this design. The solar panels that we've got quotes for will be on hold indefinitely, with the winter overshadowing making this sustainable living choice sub-economic for our family. The bulk and scale of the proposed design will loom over our truly modest home, and it'll be visible from my living room, my dining room, my kitchen, my bedroom, my veranda, my front garden and my back garden. There will be no escape from us. From the moment I open my bedroom curtains, I will be able to see this house in its dominant form. And this is all in the context of a second story, which should be set back 2 meters from the 7.7 meter street ground floor setback. Practically the whole first floor is discretionary. All other 2-story houses on the street, regardless of offset against the ground floor building lines, have a first floor setback in relation to the street of at least 5.3 meters. There's been a complete lack of regard for our privacy from both the applicant and administration. The provisions of the R codes are based on the assumption that ground level privacy is achieved through the existence of a 1.8 metre boundary fence, and that development will be situated alongside your property and not, as in this case, in the front setback of your property. We've been advised that dividing fences do not form part of this application. And today I've been informed by administration that despite the whole development not complying with the 7.7 metre setback, that the side fence has to comply with the 7.7 metre setback, which provides me with no privacy whatsoever. The design fails to recognise or address the significant impact the deviation from a 7.7 metre street setback on a sloping and elevated block will have on my family's privacy. If the 7.7 metre street setback were maintained, there would be no opportunity for the house or alfresco to extend so close to the southern boundary and to overlook and overshadow our lives. The alfresco and main living areas are elevated 1 metre in relation to our boundary level, with the alfresco setback only 1.4 metres and the kitchen setback 5.4. In any other context, this significant visual intrusion would not be allowed. The elevated alfresco balcony would have to be set back 7.5 metres from the side boundary, and an elevated kitchen would have to be set back 6 metres from the side boundary. Anyone stood
Catherine,
or
you have
sat-
reached your time limit, so would you mind just
Can finish.
concluding? Thank you.
Anyone stood or sat in these areas will have a direct line of sight into my living room, master bedroom, veranda, front garden, and conversely, we will be able to see them. This lack of visual privacy will have a massive impact on me and my family and how we live our lives. And whilst this might be the applicant's dream home, it would become our nightmare. There is no compromise in the design. Instead, the design
Catherine,
needlessly
there's
and
probably-
selfishly takes from the street and it takes from the neighbours.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. And we did receive your email this afternoon as well. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm Fiona Hunter from 31 Gill Street. I did speak last Tuesday, so I don't have too much to say, but I would like to thank all of the councillors and the mayor who attended the site over the last 2 weeks to see with your own eyes the huge impact this development will have on not just the 3 direct neighbouring properties, but the entire streetscape. I think Judith perhaps walked somebody down the street to see that as well. Our home on 31 Gill Street, our first floor setback is 7 metres back from the Auckland Street boundary on the northern side of the facade, then opening up to a 9 metre setback or 8.5 to 9 metre setback on the southern side. We also fall into line with the Gill Street average setback of 5.2 metres. Whilst we also had minor concessions made for us, mostly for reasons of previously approved plans, we believe it honours the feel of the streetscape and area, and certainly has not upset an entire street of people. We respectfully ask that this plan for 80 Auckland Street be denied or at least deferred to be looked into further. There are many designs that could go on this block that wouldn't cause the intrusion that this one has. We still haven't received any information, any added information on the process of the previous plans that were approved. So I think it will take 45 days or something like that for freedom of information to come through. So we do also ask if any precedents have been set on the previous plans, that is also maybe a reason to defer the current plans. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. I understand administration has provided information in relation to the previous development application. Are you saying you're seeking further information?
Only the same dates that I sent in my original letter to you. So they sent me the same information that I'd already sent to you about what date it was went in, what date it was approved,
Okay.
that it was a turnaround in 5 weeks. That's all that I've received. Oh, and additional to that, they said which neighbours got the letter for
Right.
that. That was it.
Okay.
But no information. I mean, obviously we'd
Yeah.
like information into how many other plans went through.
Yeah. Okay.
were-
Because that's a process issue. We are leaving that interaction between
Okay.
you and administration to
Okay.
pursue.
So
But
do we go through governance for that? Is that what we do?
I think if you continue to work through Jane ID, that would be appropriate.
Okay,
Yeah. Thanks,
you.
Fiona.
thank you.
Next speaker, please. Are there any further speakers this evening? Thanks. Thanks, Cozzy.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. My name is Cozzy Skiripa. I live in Auckland Street, and obviously I'm here to voice my very strongest objections to the development application at 80 Auckland Street, which is 9.1 in tonight's agenda. I am going to harp on what happened here 21 years ago, because under the guidance of our mayor at the time, Nick Catania, hundreds of residents who had watched as development after development was brought into our neighbourhood, we needed to do something about it. And under his guidance, we decided that we would look at changing our R codes. These developers were far more motivated by profit and didn't give a hoot about our streetscape, our amenities, or our way of life. 21 years later, 3 or 4 mayors later, you can imagine my shock when I saw this development application. I was shocked for 2 reasons. Number one, that it was so blatantly against anything that we had hoped would ever be built in our area, and that we had worked for so hard for so many years. It in fact has taken us back 22 years. Residents in the neighbourhood are furious that we would even consider that this development be approved. There are hundreds of residents that worked tirelessly. My contribution was recognised with a Vincent Citizenship of the Year award, which I was very proud to have won. But it just simply indicated the, I suppose, the enthusiasm and the will to change what was happening in our streets. I see this development as an affront, almost as in many ways, I think it's an insult to the huge amount of hours that.
Cosy, I'm just very conscious that the applicant is here, and this is quite an emotional situation. So if we could just.
My apologies. You can imagine when you consider that we basically door knocked 385 houses and spoke to them at length. We did that 3 times. It took us 10 years of door knocking to make sure that a development like this does not go ahead. We're not against development. Can you imagine the amount of developments that have actually occurred since or within those 21 years? There have been hundreds, but they have been sympathetic to what the community would expect. And still there is enough there for everyone to enjoy their life, enjoy their new house, and so on. I don't think this has made any effort, this development, to fit in with what's already there. And I'm actually very saddened, and there will be hundreds of other people that will also be very saddened. Thank you.
Are there any further speakers this evening before I close public question time?
Good evening, Mayor Cole. Good evening, councillors. My name's Chris Hakin. I'm from 78 Auckland Street. At Tuesday's council briefing, Riverstone Homes described the proposed development at 80 Auckland Street as a relatively humble dwelling. Riverstone Homes is based in Peppermint Grove, and as their website states, they design and build custom luxury homes. Relatively humble dwelling is not what I see on the plans, the artist's impression, or the council's scale render. I see a large luxury home on a small sloping lot in an elevated position on Auckland Street. The design consists of unbroken built form for 26 metres from the lot's northern boundary to its southern boundary. The recommendation states that the site characteristics have largely driven the design response, but fails to provide the context that the proposed dwelling has a floor area that, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, is 46% larger than the average floor area of new houses in Perth. The applicant is seeking concessions from the established streetscape ranging from 30 to 62% on the ground floor front setback, the porch setback, the first floor setback, the balcony setback. Any suggestions that the concessions being sought are modest and solely the result of complexities of an irregular shaped lot are simply not evidenced by the previous development applications approved for this lot, including the current approved 5-bedroomed house, which has a smaller floor area, less bulk, provides actual physical separation between the neighbouring properties at the northern and southern boundaries, and actually transitions down the hill. The recommendation states that the lot slopes down by 2.2 metres from its northern boundary to its southern boundary, but fails to highlight that the slope has not been used to minimise bulk and scale. Instead, Riverstone Homes have used it to provide a ceiling height of over 3.5 metres in the southern half of the ground floor, thus increasing the building's bulk and scale. Instead of terracing the building down the hill, they've designed a house with the largest elevation and bulk in the downhill part of the lot. They've stated that they've made significant and numerous amendments to the plans. However, these were not significant enough for the DRP to change its assessment. The plans were only supported for 4 of the 10 design principles of good design at the 3rd referral. And in fact, amendments to the plans were used to further add development to the site, such as an in-ground pool within the front setback. To illustrate how opportunistic this development application is, the applicant is seeking a 60% concession on the first floor setback. This is in addition to the 62% concession sought on the ground floor setback. If this design were amended to meet the deemed to comply 2-metre upper floor setback, it would result in a floor area still 34% larger than the average Perth new
If
build
you
home.
could please make your final comments. You've reached your 3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You've been asked to approve a development which is inconsistent with the established streetscape for Auckland Street, and the DRP concluded, and I quote, "The built form on the site appears overdeveloped, resulting in an outcome which is out of keeping with the surrounding context and has negative amenity impacts for both residents and adjoining neighbours." Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers that wish to come forward? Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for your comments and your questions this evening. Appreciate you coming down and that there's a diversity of opinion in the room. And yes, we will take up questions that have been asked of us during the meeting. That we have also received written statements and questions this evening. We've received questions in response to questions from the May 2023 council meeting on the city's privacy policy, and we've received questions and statements in relation to 11.5, the annual budget, and also 9.1 Auckland Street. We had Judith Burrows provide a written statement also. So that concludes public question time, and we will continue to move forward with the meeting. For your information, we do deal with the items that have been raised by members of the public gallery first. So the first item that we'll be dealing with this evening will be 9.1, which is Auckland Street, followed by 11.5, the annual budget, followed by 11.6, the city's underground power financial model. But before we get there, we have a few other things that we need to deal with. So first of all, councillors, item 4. Are there any applications for leave of absence? Okay, no. Item 5, receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. We do have one petition this evening. Thank you. The petition has been received with 28 signatures from Narelle O'Neill objecting to the proposed lease of a portion of Britannia Reserve, portion 41, which is lot 31 Britannia Road, Leederville, known as Britannia Reserve, requesting that a suitable alternative location is considered for the telecommunications tower proposed for Britannia Reserve. Given that that item is on the agenda at item number 9.4. Thank you very much, Councillor Loden. What I would recommend to council is that we receive the petition and deal with that this evening when we come to item 9.4. Councillors, any alternate view? Okay, I'll put that motion. Councillor Hallett moving, Councillor Alex Castle seconding. All those in favour? I declare that carried. So we'll deal with the petition when we come to item 9.4. Thanks, CEO. That takes us to confirmation of minutes for the May council meeting. Can I please have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes? Oh, okay. We have received a request to amend the confidential section. So just a question to governance. Is it possible to adopt the minutes with the exclusion of the confidential section, or do we need to adopt the minutes in their entirety?
Through the chair, confirming that you can adopt the minutes because the decision of the amendments and the decision of the item is captured in the minutes, and we can review the reasoning related to those decisions at the next council meeting, once we've been able to seek some advice about the confidentiality
So
element.
if the minutes are adopted this evening and council's made a decision to adopt those minutes, how are they then, what's the procedure for amending them if they've already been adopted?
Through the chair, this would just be, this wouldn't alter the decisions that were made at the meeting. So we're able to make sort of a procedural amendment to the minutes to clarify what occurred at the meeting, but it doesn't alter what the decisions that were made at the meeting. So we can, at future meetings, have an item put forward to amend the minutes to provide clarity.
Okay, so your advice to council is to move forward with the adoption of the minutes. Okay, all right. I'll put the minutes for adoption. Can I have a mover and seconder? Moved by councillor Castle, seconded by councillor Hallett. All those in favour? Yes.
Thank you. Question to administration. When I put forward my amendment, I was told that this item would be deferred and no decision would be made in terms of voting on the motion. Has that position changed since 5:55?
Through the chair, to clarify, so the advice provided prior to the meeting was that the amendment that was proposed would not be considered this evening. That could be considered at a future meeting, but the minutes would still be adopted.
All right. Well, I'll just say my piece then first. I'm not going to support ratifying the minutes. Minutes are a reflection of what is said. And so if we are voting on it now, notwithstanding, I did have an amendment on the cards to talk to the reasons why I thought the minutes weren't accurate as to what happened in the meeting. Voting on it now seemed to me that I'm sanctioning what the minutes are saying. So at this point, even though you're saying that I can put forward an amendment, I'm not going to be supportive of it. I think the problem, the minutes are such an important part of this process. Residents, ratepayers, the community need transparency on our decision making, not just the outcome of the decision, but any issues and concerns that are raised as part of debate. And in this case, given there are some elements of confidentiality, all that discussion was held in confidence. And so there's no transparency to the public about some of the what I view as significant issues and concerns related to the sale of this in relation to this item, which is the sale of leadable car parks. So
Councillor Uplow, we're not here to re-prosecute your views of the actual item. It's just to talk about the actual process of amending the minutes.
Sure. And so what I'm saying is I'm not going to support the minutes in its current state because I think they're misleading. So I just think that transparency, not just about the outcome, is really important, and the public deserve to know the reasons and issues and concerns that were raised behind closed doors without disclosing confidential items. Thanks.
I need to go back to the mover and seconder to give you the opportunity to speak if you wish. No? Okay. Any councillors wish to make a comment? Look, my understanding is that needs to be reviewed by the probity advisor, and that's the reason why it hasn't been able to go forward, because the probity advisor was in attendance during that confidential session. So it does need to go through that process. We've heard from governance that adopting the minutes today does not preclude them from being amended in the future. It's about ensuring the probity of that process, that was debated behind closed doors, and that is really important to the commercial in confidence of that process, so as to not cause any problem with that process proceeding. So that's the reason that I understand why this is being deferred until the next meeting. But it is your right to vote against the minutes.
But what you're saying, maybe
And
what
are you
I'm
asking
seeking
a
is a
question?
motion
Because-
to defer then, because I'm not sure if you're saying it's being deferred, but we're voting on it, That's
No,
has to
not to
sanction.
defer. The idea, the advice that we've been provided with is that we can move forward with adopting the minutes. That's up to each individual councillor to decide whether they vote in support or against that, and you can reserve your right to vote against that. And the idea is that those are amended at the next meeting. So it's not a deferral, it's about adopting the minutes as they are and then adding additional information at the future meeting once the probity advisor has been able to review the amendment, which I think most of us saw at 5:30 p.m. this evening. Okay, if there's any further debate or questions, okay, I'll put the motion to adopt the minutes. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried with councillor Iapolo and councillor Alexander voting against. Announcements by the presiding member. Well, look, we do have a very big agenda this evening with some substantial items. So just a statement from me really around the fact that I think it is a bit of a milestone that the City of Vincent has got to the point where in June, in the current budget year, on the agenda this evening, we have the revised long-term financial plan, the adoption of the annual budget, the corporate business plan for the next 4 years capital works program, the underground financial model and event sponsorship all on the one agenda. And I think that starting out here some almost 10 years previous, this would have seemed unimaginable that we just weren't in the position to be able to do that. And I think that just really shows that in terms of our financial maturity, how far we've come to be able to adopt a significant part of the integrated performance and review framework on one night. So just wanted to say, well done. You know, we have an excellent CFO and an excellent finance team that's been driving this. And we have a CEO who's been coordinating this from a strategic perspective. So I think this is a really good outcome, and just wanted to note that is that's a first for us here at the City of Vincent. So that's provided it's all adopted this evening. You never know, but it's here to be debated. So I'll now go to declarations of interest. CEO.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the declarations received for tonight's meeting include the following. Councillor Warner's declared a financial interest in relation to item 11.7 on event sponsorship. Councillor Warner in relation to event sponsorship as outlined last week, noting that Councillor Warner is a general manager of one of the events, business operator for at least two more, and a business partner submitted one of the applications. Councillor Warner is not seeking approval to participate in the debate nor to remain in the chambers nor vote in the matter. Councillor Warner also declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 9.2.173 Oxford Street Leederville proposed alterations and additions to small bar, noting that Councillor Warner is partnering with the venue to provide a space for free filmmaker workshops in July. Mayor Cole declared an impartiality interest on the same item 9.2.173 Oxford Street, noting that the extent of the interest is that Mayor Cole attended the official opening of the bar, Roberts on Oxford, on 5 June 2021. Councillor Iapolo declared a proximity interest in relation to item 11.5 on the adoption of the budget, noting that there are expenses within the budget agenda item that relate to works on the administration building and civic centre, which is in direct proximity to Councillor Iapolo's residential property. The expenses are inconsequential and immaterial in the entire budget, in the opinion of administration. Administration has agreed to exclude these budget items to be able to split the vote if that was the case, or council could approve Councillor Iapolo participating in the debate, noting that the items are not significant in the context of the overall decision being made by council tonight.
So thank you for providing two options. Is there one that administration recommends over the other?
No, it'd be fine for council to approve Councillor Iapolo's participation of the debate, given it's only a minor percentage of the overall capital works budget.
Okay,
It's been
so we
contemplated.
do need to vote on this. So what we're being asked to vote on is councillor Oplow's participation in item 11.5, where he has declared a proximity interest, but where administration has found that those items where to do minor maintenance works to the civic building are of an inconsequential and immaterial nature to cause councillor Oplow to be excluded from that item voting and participating. Is there any questions before I ask for the motion to be moved and seconded? Can I please have a mover and seconder? Moved by councillor Warner, seconded by councillor Loden. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Does councillor Oplow have to vote? No? No, on the actual motion. Oh, yeah, sorry, you should have actually been out of the room. I forgot that part, but it is inconsequential and immaterial, so we won't worry about that too much. Okay, moving on then to go around the room and see whether council meeting members would like items called out for debate that haven't already been, or that are not a absolute majority decision required. So councillor Hallett, in addition to the items that we have pulled out for debate and absolute majority decisions, do you have anything further? Councillor Castle, councillor Ipolo?
Yes, 9.1.
We already have that.
They have that.
Yeah.
11.4.
Yes, we have that.
Okay, 11.5 is absolute majority for the agenda. 11.6.
Yep.
11.9. 12.2 and 12.3, which is absolute majority. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Warner, councillor Loden?
I'm not sure if 9.4 is automatically pulled out because it was a petition. I've never come across that previously.
Yeah, that's been raised.
That's been
through a
raised. Okay.
petition. So yes, we'll call that out. Thank you. Councillor Alexander, councillor Gonchevsky.
So 11.7.
11.7. Yep, thank you. Just checking we've got all items are. Can I just check with council members? Do you wish to debate the confidential item 17.1, or are you satisfied with the question and answer session at the council briefing on that item? So no one's calling that forward? Okay, 17.1. Oh no, we have to call out 12.1. Apologies. Yep.
Sorry, does she mean that's going to be on block? Oh, no, I would, yeah. I don't.
CEO, just to confirm not to pull out 17.1.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the following items are being proposed to be moved on block include items 9.2, 9.3, 10.1, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 11.8, 12.4.
Could I please have a mover and seconder to adopt the en bloc items? Move councillor Castle, seconded councillor Loden. All those in favour? I declare the en bloc items are carried. Okay, so the first item that we're dealing with this evening is item 9.1, which is 80 Auckland Street, North Perth, proposed single house. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved by councillor Loden, seconded by councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge how difficult this is for both the residents and the owners of the property. This is not an uncommon thing that we see because people have aspirations of what they would like to build on their block, and residents around that area have challenges with what the aspirations are. And that's where this planning process comes to the fore. We have the R codes, which specifies the space in which you can build. And if you can keep within that footprint, then you don't have issues with planning. If you are outside of that footprint, then that's where discretion is required. And that's where council gets involved, which is always really fun because it puts us between the people that are around a property versus the people that are within the property, as we're seeing here today. So it is your home that you're talking about, whether you're the neighbour or you're the person living in the house. And so I get how emotive this is. Excuse me. But for us as a decision maker here, this is based on planning. So we have to remove all of those emotional considerations out of this decision and look at what are the planning considerations here. And in that context, we are really looking at what is the discretion that is sought and whether that is appropriate in this context. And that then comes down to, does that discretion that's been sought impact the neighbours to an extent that is not reasonable for what is otherwise being achieved on the property. This is a very difficult block as well, so it's very atypical because of the orientation that we have, we've talked a lot about this. And in the context of this block, it is appropriate to allow some level of discretion. It's just a question of how much should be allowed. When you look at the developable area of the block, this sort of very thin triangle wedge that you have, there is a need to show discretion because otherwise it makes a very awkward looking house. But then it needs to be set into that street context. From my perspective, I feel there's been too much discretion granted in this case. My inclination is to defer this item because I recognise a refusal causes a lot of pain for the applicants. And I'd like to see them go back and take an opportunity at addressing some of those areas of those impacts they're seeing on their neighbours. I recognise that probably exceeds the statutory timeframe and therefore would be potentially considered a refusal. I have requested a refusal be prepared as well if that's the case, and that's where we end up. But from my point of view, the thing that I'm really struggling with here is the street setbacks that for this property, and particularly the graduation as you move from the corner property to the neighbour's property. And this is really hard because effectively the back corner of this property is in line with the front of the neighbouring property. And that's where this graduation needs to happen. And also the setback, the top floor setbacks that are then impacting as well on those neighbours, particularly as this is to the north. Now, that being said, there is going to need to be discretion for this property. And I guess residents in the area should be prepared for that fact. From my perspective, this goes too far in that regard of the amount of discretion that's provided. I will listen to the debate and hear others' views and take that on board, but I'll look to move a deferral for this item to allow the opportunity for that redesign process to be looked at further, particularly to look at what the design review panel has provided as comments and the DRP chairperson as well. But if it is not deferred, then I would seek to refuse this item. Thank you.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Similarly, I can't support the officer recommendation as is and would support a deferral or a refusal. I think for me, the key bit of it, and particularly in being on site, is just the way that this bulk is just made even worse through the lack of the required setbacks. And so for me, it's the size of the property can't meet I guess the principles as we would see them in Vincent. I think it would be helpful if the commentary from DRP chair could be reviewed again by the applicant and addressed, I guess, a bit more fulsomely than in the previous ones. I know that's a difficult thing if you have an aspiration for a particular property, but I think the changes thus far haven't been sufficiently addressing those comments for me to feel that it can be supported in this context.
Councillor Castle. Thank you, Mayor. Look, I agree. I'm not prepared to support this proposal. I think that we do on occasion see unusual blocks, perhaps not as awkward as this one. And we are prepared to consider that there are limitations on what can be built on a block of this size and this orientation. But in my view, the discretion that's being asked of us goes too far beyond what is acceptable for the block. It is important to understand what those limitations are before lodging a development application and not expecting this level of discretion to be exercised. For me, I think the biggest factor which has been mentioned is the setbacks, but what that results in is an amenity impact on the neighbours as a result of the bulk and scale, which in my opinion is too great. And so I would certainly be interested in a deferral if administration is of the view that the applicant would consider revising or reviewing the plans. I'd also have concerns about where the DRP landed. We would normally like to see a progression towards a lot more green boxes in those columns. And I think that there's really more work to be done to make this proposal approvable. Councillors, any further comments? Look, I'll comment. Just want to acknowledge that R20 is the lowest coded area that we have in the City of Vincent, and I note the long history around the residents seeking that. And I think when we look at places like Jundana, where we've seen a lot of subdivision, I thank the residents for really what you've done is you've helped achieve character retention, which is something that we really struggle to do in the City of Vincent. We're trying to do it street by street, and it's really, really hard. So I really would just like to acknowledge that zoning and the work of the residents to retain that R20 zoning. The Director, John Corbellini, and I fronted up to Ben Wyatt, who was called in to deal with our scheme because the Planning Minister had a land ownership in the district, and we again reiterated how important that had been to us in terms of keeping those pre-1940s homes in the City of Vincent and keeping the spaciousness and the trees and the gardens. So that is to be acknowledged. Also just want to comment on the subdivision. It's really interesting. I think that Western Australia is the only, if not one of the few jurisdictions where the state determines subdivision and not local government. And I do see these issues increasingly where the subdivision is approved by the WA Planning Commission, and then we need to then have lots developed according to that subdivision. And I really think that sometimes just doesn't work to the best advantage, because if you consider this lot, it really is a difficult lot. The orientation, the site level differences. This was the original side elevation of the lot. So to develop this lot, you really do need to provide a wide and shallow home. It's very different presentation to the street than, say, a standard home where the ridgeline would go towards the back of the property, not along the streetscape. So I just want to acknowledge that is a definite factor here in terms of the way in which the lot has been subdivided and the way in which this site needs to be developed. I know that the amendment the piece of paper that we have from Councillor Oden, which was an alternate, but I think, look, personally also I would prefer a deferral, because I think that does give time and leeway. It then remains up to the applicant if they wish to see that as a deemed refusal. But if we can encourage this to stay here in this zone where we can continue to work to try to make a few tweaks, I think that's a better outcome. For me, when I went to site, I guess my main consideration was really the interface to the southern boundary and that site level difference, and the impact of having that alfresco sitting up high and over the adjoining residents. So if we are going to look at deferral and having the ability for this to be revisited, I note that the applicant since last week has made that 0.2 metre change to the pool and the surrounding deck. And I'd like to acknowledge that and thank the applicant for making that change. I would like to see that go back further into the southeast corner to try to bring that alfresco down to moderate that transition between the new development and the existing character home. So that's for me. I think there is a level of that being a very potentially at times, you know, that's an outdoor living space. There's a pool there, then alfresco. There's discussion about having a wall that's a sort of a screening wall with additional plantings, but it's not going to present as a 1.8 metre fence to the side at the alfresco. It's going to be more like 1.1 metres, and I think that still requires a little bit more transitioning work to better align to the neighbour. So that would be my advice to the applicant, and I hope that we can actually make some modifications and everybody can move forward. Look, I'll put it on the record. When my neighbour built their home and I faced a 1.5 story stairwell window overlooking my home and my garden as a non-habitable room, I felt quite distressed by that, but my neighbour and I are now on good terms and we've moved forward, and I think that you can overcome these things. People do need to live next door to each other. We do need to have neighbourliness between us, and these processes can be incredibly hard, but I'd just like to encourage perseverance. We can hopefully find a way forward so that we can, and once this process is agreed, I think things can settle and people can move forward. And that's my 5 minutes. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Loden, you wish to close debate? Or you wish to move a deferral motion?
Yes, on the assumption that everybody is finished having their say, I would request put forward a deferral motion to allow the applicant to consider a greater graduation of the property as it moves to the south from both a horizontal, so distance from the street, and also vertical, to pick up on Mayor Cole's comments, and also to look at greater articulation of the development, so setbacks between the ground floor and the top floor as well.
Is there a mover for the deferral? That's moved by Councillor, moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Hallett. It being a procedural motion, there is no debate. So for all of those in favour, please vote now. That's unanimous. Okay, that has been deferred. We would prefer for this to come back as soon as possible, given that the statutory timeframe's already passed. So that, I think if we can get this to the next meeting, that would be fantastic. Okay, so the next item raised is 11.5, which is the adoption of the annual budget for 23-24. This is an absolute majority decision required. Can I please have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Hallett.
Look, I note that there's a couple of amendments on the table, but I guess I just want to say that I recognise that this budget is one that is landing in amongst, the quote unquote cost of living crisis, but it's also not just a catchphrase, it is a meaningful and currently felt issue for many people in Vincent, for all of us really. But I think that ultimately the maturity that Mayor Cole spoke about in the way that this budget has been developed, that it has been built off, I guess, our previous iteration of our long-term financial plan, and that ultimately what we see in this budget is a 4.5% increase in the amount of rates being collected by the city, but that it happens in a GRV year. So really, if you are, for those who are paying above the minimum rate, if your rates are going up in Vincent, it's because your property value has increased. And I think that that might sound hollow, but I ultimately think that where we're seeing a we're seeing that property values have gone up in Vincent, and particularly in certain places in Vincent in the recent years. And I really do think that's because of a lot of the things that are contained in this budget. We've got investment in transport and infrastructure, pedestrianisation, ongoing investment in greening. We're looking at being able to support our community to take advantage of the opportunity of underground power. And we're still, I think, kicking great goals in terms of supporting our local sporting clubs, community organisations, town teams, and other non-government organisations that call Vincent home. I don't think there's any reason why Vincent won't continue to see sustained growth in value for our residents and business in coming years. And I think this has been a budget that had the development. We've had many opportunities as councillors to have input into this budget, and all of the other suite of documents that we will be considering this evening. This has been certainly the most, well, I guess, orderly and proper, if we're going to steal a planning term, process for the budget. And I certainly, it's been something that I've been very happy to be involved in. Note that there are some amendments on the table, which I will consider. But ultimately, I don't have a great deal of controversy to talk about in this budget or anything like that. I don't. I'm very happy that we are moving ahead with a mature approach to our financial management. And thank you to administration for their work over the previous 6+ months on bringing this and the other documents forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Yes, I'm supportive of the motion as is, although I'm interested to hear some more of the discussion around some of the proposed amendments. I think likewise, we've had strong engagement with admin over the last 6 months, and it's been a really great process. So thank you to the staff involved in that and managing that and being very responsive to our many requests and discussion about different items. I'd also think that, this is in the context of a very difficult economic period for not just Vincent, obviously, but all of Australia. But I would also like to just remind, I guess, anyone listening and the chamber that we have had historically low rating in this council, and a headline figure of 4.5%, while sounding large, 4.5% of a smaller number is not very much. And so I think one of the important parts of the way that local government delivers its services is off the back of collective contributions of the whole community. And I think that that's really important, and that we all experience services in different ways. We access different services, and we don't always benefit from everything that's delivered in our particular area of Vincent. But we have a fantastic community that has what I think a very great level of service from a local government for what's actually a relatively small. That's not to say that there's not pain felt currently among community members within Vincent. And so that's why we have hardship provisions in there. And I encourage people to access those should they find this a difficult budget to get behind.
Councillors, comments on the budget? Councillor Apollo.
Thank you, Mayor. We sat here a year ago and when we considered the budget last year, and one of the concerns was that I raised and Councillor Alexander was the capital budget. And at that point was raised to the attention of this council that every year habitually the City of Vincent over budgets capital expenditure, meaning that it seeks to spend or claims to be able to spend an amount of capital expenditure that's never done before. Last year was 20.5 million and we came in at 11 million. Before that, the record was 9.5 million. And I guess the one contribution through the budget workshop process that I said that I cared about was to have a reasonable capital budget expenditure. And here we sit now again with a proposal to spend 19.1 million. and in this next fiscal year. And again, I say the same comment that I don't believe that the administration is able to spend this amount of capital works in a financial year, given that the most they've ever done is 11 million. That's probably my biggest bugbear with the budget. I think if you look at that one item where you go back 10 years and every year the cumulative capital expenditure over budget is something about 50 million. If you look at the all the years since FY14, the effect on rates and ratepayers base is worrying and a concern. If you look to the extent that we don't spend money that we say we're going to spend and we raise that from municipal funds, that means ratepayers are paying for capital works that aren't spent each year, and that has the effect of increasing the base for rates. So when you apply a percentage increase year on year, that increase that wasn't spent and was taxed ahead of time, when you run the numbers for the for each year back for the last 7 or 8 years, the base rate, residents' rates have increased by 5% at a minimum. So the base has increased just because of timing differences. And if you actually, if we were a council that would ever consider a decrease in rates, where we've overrated in 1 year and we make good the next year, then rates would be about 25% lower based on my assumptions. Now, I've done some very broad assumptions on this. I've asked for a proper reconciliation based on the actual figures, but that hasn't been forthcoming either as a councillor or requests through the audit committee. So I do have a real concern about this CapEx. I continue to have that concern about our budgets, and I worry about the effect it's having on increasing all ratepayers' base rates, from which once you put a rate increase on a base, it's in perpetuity. So you raised 7.6% last year and you didn't spend it. Well, suddenly all the rates come up to that level. So unless you ever consider reducing rates, that is a permanent increase. So I do worry about this just because of the fact that it's been happening since, as far as I've looked back, which is only as far as FY14. The other item in the budget outside of CapEx is clearly my position, which is unchanged on 1 hour free parking. It's embedded in the budget. So there's a budget assumption there. I don't agree with the rationale that Leederville should continue with a $1 for the first hour free. We've already acknowledged that the trial has been a disaster for retailers. I think that I'm not sure why we're signalling out Leederville. I haven't heard any rational arguments as to why Leederville should be excluded, where all the other car parks have been. Administration is willing to pull that trial, the effect of the trial, and so I think that what I'm hearing from Leederville retailers is that it's disastrous for them, with a 17% reduction in visitor traffic, vehicle traffic just to the avenue alone, and 13% decrease in vehicles across both car parks over the trial period. And I think the last point was the $2 flat minimum fee on curbside parking. I think that that's a disaster too, because that just stops people, short-term visitors, from coming and visiting, pick up a coffee or whatever. No one wants to pay $2 for a 5 or 10 minute stop. Anyway, I will like to move an amendment. So when other people have had a chance to speak to the substantive, I'd like to move a proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Apollo. Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. So just following on from Councillor Arapo's comments there, my understanding is that the 50 million in over budget is basically money that is obtained at the beginning of the year. And when we go through a budgeting process, we estimate what the costs are going to be for all of our activities. And then undoubtedly those numbers change because it's a budget, not an actual. Sometimes it takes us longer, but that money either is deferred into a subsequent capital budget, or goes back into municipal funds, or goes into a reserve, which we then allocate. So it's the total quantum of funds that this is not money that's disappearing. It's just money that is being allocated differently because we want to start projects. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that's correct. So if you were to look at the 50 million over 10 years, it wouldn't all be muni funded either. There could be a large portion of grants we never actually received. There could be reserves we never drew down on. There could be contributions we never received. And that's absolutely correct. If there was surplus funds from projects not completed in a year that won't carry forward, they essentially roll up into the opening surplus, which then would reduce your rate impact on the following year. So yeah, the compounding effect, it's not quite that simple. And essentially the funds are repurposed, like you said, and they might fund another item in the subsequent year budget, which without that would require a rate increase.
I mean, I think this is an important point because we in the way we budget, from my perspective, the way we should be budgeting, it's about budgeting conservatively for what we need to do. We need to fund our asset renewal and all the various activities that we're committed to doing across the city. In probably about March, the staff actually come up with an estimate of what they think their costs are going to be for the next year. And best endeavours give an accurate representation of that. But it is an estimate by definition. I mean, if you talked a class 5 estimate, like plus or minus 3%, that's still got an error margin associated with it. And all of these budget items are not at a class 5 estimate because that's unrealistic from a resourcing point of view. So I accept the premise that there is a level of uncertainty in how we budget, but that fundamentally work on this principle of the long-term financial plan, that we need to fund our asset renewal activities over multiple years. I also accept that there is an element of some of the money that we obtain through rates will carry over into a subsequent year. The alternative would be to kick certain capital works items out of the budget to allow funds, because we can't start activities that we haven't fully funded. That's unreasonable for the administration, and it's unfair on ratepayers as well. My fear is that if we go down this path, we end up where we were pre 10 years ago, and Mayor Cole can probably reflect on this better than I can, because I believe she just started on council. I think we had an $8 million budget black hole because we hadn't properly funded the activities that we needed to undertake. The city had to go through a massive cost reduction exercise to make sure that we remain solvent. We are government. We can't operate on lean principles and so forth because we have to stand the test of time. We will be here for the next 100 years, if not more, unless the state government revokes the Local Government Act. So we can't operate like a small, nimble business entity because we can't run that risk of going insolvent. We have to be conservative in how we estimate these things. We will probably overestimate what our costs are because you want to be conservative in how you do that. And we want to make sure that we don't end up being too close to the wire. And so this budget is appropriate. If we were to start kicking things out of the budget, deferring them into future years, fundamentally, we're not funding our asset renewal. And that's really, really important. That's how we ended up in that $8 million budget black hole, because we kicked the problem down the road, deferred it to future councils, which was unreasonable for those councillors that are coming in. And to be honest, we're sitting here talking about a 7.6% rate rise last year and a 4.5% rate rise this year, and then a further 5.5% rate rise in the year after, which was 4.5, but is now 5.5 because we've gotten rid of half of the 1 hour free, not rid of half of 1 hour free, whatever the terminology is. That's gone up by an additional 1%. That is actually basically catching up because of that poor performance and that underrating systemically for about a decade that happened in the previous 10 years. So it's been the long-term issue that I've been aware of on council that we've massively underrated here. And this is about addressing that issue and making sure that we're properly funding our assets sustainably into the future. If we're not prepared to raise the rates for that, then we actually need to reduce our asset base. We need to knock over our buildings. We need to get rid of our parks, sell off our assets and things like that. Now, I don't advocate for that avenue. We did try that very, very unsuccessfully. I think we knocked over 3 toilets for a grand saving of about, I don't know, 50 grand a year or something like that. And we got a hell of a lot of pain from the residents in the community around those things that we undertook. So unless we're, and the other thing is the biggest part of our asset renewal is maintaining our roads, which we can't do anything about. We must maintain our roads. So I just want to lay that out there, that we have a strong need to fund our asset renewal and fund it sustainably into the future. Thank you.
Councillors. Councillor Alexander.
I'm still trying to take all that in. I'm not sure whether the sky is falling in or not, but I suspect it is, apparently. Look, I do have some concerns with certainly with the $1 at Leederville. I think, you know, we have to be a savvy council, and, you know, I saw some talk about 83% of the people that turn up at Leederville are not the City of Vincent ratepayers. Well, that's exactly what business people are looking for. So, you know, I'll have trouble supporting a budget that is not going to reintroduce that to Leederville. We have, I think, a range of things that we have to look at and address, and perhaps we haven't. And, you know, it appears administration costs go up, you know, approximately, you know, $2.5 million, you know, every year, every budget, it appears to go up. And then put that together with, you know, being a savvy council. If we're a savvy council, we know that labour costs, and labour is hard to get. And we know that materials are difficult and hard to get. And so what do? We propose a CapEx project bigger than we've ever had before. Now, I still haven't been able to work that out, and no one's been able to make any sense other than go on long rambling speeches about it. So, you know, I have a difficulty when we say we're going to spend 20.4 million, and
I think all of councillors' inputs should be valued. We probably don't need to refer to them as long rambling speeches.
How do you suggest I refer to it then, perhaps?
Debate.
Debate, okay. Long rambling debate. So
I tried.
Sorry, look, you know, I just find it, we talk about being savvy and at times we're not. And then we come up with explanations that don't make any sense to me. So, you know, wanting to spend more in a time when you can't get labour, you can't get materials, doesn't make a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense to me to withdraw the $1 free at Leederville, then and other places, reintroduce it to other places, but not Leederville. And when, you know, the stats we've got and, you know, the math doesn't add up with us losing potentially, well, I don't think we'd lose 83%, but certainly it was said that 83% come from outside. So, you know, I just want to make those points. $2.5 million a year, the city's expenses go up for administration. I think the $1 million, the dollar free should be reintroduced to Leederville, and not just for ratepayers. And I think we seriously need to consider, are we actually rating people in advance and then having that money and not spending it? And that's what appears to happen with our CapEx. Okay, thanks.
Councillors. I'll make a few comments. So on the capital expenditure, I feel that this is something that we have received an awful lot of information on, and that the audit committees had presentations on this, that we've benchmarked ourselves against other local governments in terms of what they take in rates versus what they expend in their CapEx. And I believe there was some material that has been widely shared and circulated. We've discussed it at budget workshops, and it shows that we're sort of bang on the Metropolitan Council average in terms of how we rate and how much CapEx we actually get out the door. We compare extremely favourably to our neighbours next door in the city of Stirling. I know I don't have it to hand. I don't know if it's available, but we've clearly been provided with that information, and it's, as I said, it's been presented to the audit committee. When you look at our CapEx expenditure and the funding sources, 35% is from municipal. So 35%. Large proportions are coming from grant funding. Some of it's coming from reserves. It's grants and contributions is a sizable amount. We've got asset disposals. And when we talked about that, I think that caused a bit of concern for some members in the community. That's about fleet replacement. So it's about moving the fleet out, bringing the fleet in. It's not about disposing land to fund CapEx, because that's not really what we're doing here. So I think it's really important that when you're talking about reducing the rates because of CapEx, it really has to be understood 35% is coming from municipal. Another really important statistic, 78% of CapEx is renewal. 78% is us doing our maintenance. That is bread and butter. That is what we're required to do. And when we looked at our asset sustainability ratio, it was only really last year that we actually managed to achieve it. And we need to continue that trajectory so we don't get back to where we have been in the past. The asset sustainability ratio is a very strong guidance in terms of where we need to be in our expenditure on maintaining our facilities. And I'm confidently saying that we're doing a way better job of that than we have done in the past. And we have a lot of very aging facilities. A lot of our stuff was built around the same time because we are an inner city community. Also just want to comment, how low can we go? We're in the lowest 30% of rating councils. How low can we go? We are actually a community that has expectations about what we deliver. They do like things to be of a certain calibre, that they like our parks to be well maintained. They want us to do community events. They ask us through our strategic community plan to green Vincent. It's very clear because we do our consultation. We've just done our adoption of the SCP, and it told us we're on the right track and that people want the things to continue and they like the priorities that we have. And some of that is beyond rates, roads and rubbish. And that's what the community expectation is. And that's what they're telling us when we consult through our SCP. The other factor which is really important to me is that we need to be in the strongest financial health when we're considering taking on a major project like underground power. And we've been able to do that. We've been able to say we can borrow 50%, we can use funds from Tamala Park Reserve and our underground power reserve. If 70% of residents want a payback period, we can afford to do that. That is really significant to roll out consecutive underground power projects across the whole of the city of Vincent. You know, 2 years ago, who'd have thought? But here we are, and we're in a strong financial position to be able to do that because we have turned our minds to having reserves, and we have turned our minds to making sure our assets are maintained so that we're not in a position where we suddenly go, oh, we can't do that because we've got all of our buildings falling down. We're following the course of the long-term financial plan. On Leederville car parks, if you wish to remove the Leederville from that, and I'll talk to this more if an amendment comes forward, you'll need to add another 1% to the long-term financial plan, making that a 6.5% increase next year, which I am absolutely sure the community will not enjoy. And I just also need to say that in terms of administration costs, we're paying our staff 3.5% pay increase, absolutely obligated to do that, and superannuation contributions, and we're dealing with materials and contracts. This is not an elaborate budget. This is a maintenance-based budget. This is moderate pay increases to our staff, which we're not even sure if that's enough to keep them here, but we're doing what we need to do, and we're doing that at less than inflation. So please consider this when thinking of reducing the rate increase and returning first hour free in Leederville. Councillors, any further discussion on the budget before we go to amendments? Okay, amendments, please. Councillor Loden.
I'll just move the amendment on the green. If I can get a seconder.
Is there a seconder for the amendment on the green? Seconded by Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Pretty straightforward. I suspect the mayor might want to comment, but this makes sense. I think we can address it through the ranges instead of having a to $2 minimum curbside parking fee.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things here. One's about the managing the use of the bays, but also traditionally, or at least historically, our philosophy has been to have more expensive parking on the streets to push people into the car parks. But I think there's been some really great work going on with our parking precinct plans, and I think we might be rethinking the way that we do that on the streets. And I think particularly at the moment, having high turnover is really important. So, and I think the $2 would counteract that.
Councillors, any further debate on this one? Just to inform that I did get this advice from Paul Morris, the manager of Ranger Services. I did go to him and say, is this a highly problematic issue on the scale of infrequent to very frequent? Where is it sitting? He did advise infrequent. So this is, again, I think something that we're sort of trying to solve that perhaps isn't of a magnitude that needs solving. And also that there's no revenue associated with this in the budget. So we don't need to remove revenue from the budget. Not that that should be the determining factor, but just to advise it doesn't require an amendment to the bottom line of the budget. And that I just really strongly feel that for people who are literally pulling in and pulling out to grab something from a local business, that's exactly how we want these on-street car bays to be used. We want that churn. We want people to be able to feel that they can do that and get their coffee, get their flowers, grab a prescription, whatever it is, and that they can do that quickly and easily and just pay for the time that they're actually there, because we encourage those bays to be our highest turnover. So hence the amendment. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? I declare that carried. We're back to the substantive. Any further amendments? Councillor Opolo.
Yes, can I move the amendment in white 11.5 excluding 0.2, which has just been affected through Councillor Loden's amendment? So the amendment that I'm proposing, can I get a seconder?
I'll call for a seconder. Thanks.
Thanks.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. So what am I trying to achieve here? One, reinstatement of the 1 hour free in Leederville, an allocation of $75,000 marketing fund to advertise the reinstatement of the 1 hour free across the City of Vincent. If we don't do that, then people won't be aware and they won't come back. The amendment of the rates from 4.5 to 3%. This represents this reduction of 1.5% represents $600,000 budgetary effect to the budget. And if you take into account on the basis that the reinstatement of 1 hour free, I've been told was worth 400,000 plus 75,000, then we're talking about basically a funding of 1,075,000 in total. The amount of CapEx, the 19.1 million of CapEx in this budget, which I believe, in my opinion, is unreasonable and inflated. There is 8.9 million is funded from municipal funds. That is 46% per the handout that was provided by administration. So what I'm suggesting is not to, as I said last year, not to cut our CapEx spending. What I'm saying is that you won't spend it, and therefore let's not ask for that full amount of 9 million to be rated by taxpayers this year, because what it's going to happen is that we will be taxing them ahead of time and their rate base will increase. What I'm hoping from this amendment is that the 1 million will be funded from the 8.9 million of CapEx that is currently earmarked to be funded from ratepayers. So that is the notion of it. I think the way that CapEx is supposed to work is that you have an accurate prediction of where CapEx is, and that's why I want this reduced or through a deferral. And then to the extent that there's pre-commitments, we account for that in reserves, and that will be included via the reserves so we can draw upon it. So I don't think there's any risk that we won't satisfy our requirements to do all the maintenance or capital works that is required under our obligations. It's just a question of timing. And that's what this amendment is seeking, is to tax in the correct year, so that ratepayers aren't affected. The 9 million or the 8.9 million through municipal funds of CapEx is actually worth 22% rate increase. So if we didn't do any of that work, if we didn't do any of that 9 million, i.e. we only did 10 million, which is 1 million less than this year, we could actually fund a 22% rate decrease, right? By the numbers, if 1% of a rate increase is worth 400,000, then 8.9 million into 400,000 is 22%. So it's what I'm proposing is a prudent and responsible rate setting process, which reflects the amount that we actually spend in each year. And to the extent that we do have pre-commitments, that's fine. But surely the difference between what we spent this year, 11 million, and what we said we were going to spend at 20.5 million is not all to do with pre-commitments. I think we just need to try and continuously improve our budget accuracy. And I think that, this is the second year running, and based on the numbers back to 2014, I think there's an issue here and we could just do better. That's all I'm asking. I think that's it. 1 hour free, a deferment of CapEx, and a subsequent decrease in rates to ratepayers in what is a challenging year of 4.5% to 3%. And I don't believe that would present any undue risk given the size of the CapEx budget that administration has proposed. Thanks.
Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Look, I think with budgets in many places, they can be cut a range of different ways. And, by asking for some alterations in representing ratepayers, I think is, a reasonable thing to do, and also to understand where the council is going. I think, as Councillor Iopolo has explained, it still enables the maintenance to happen and CapEx to happen in a timely fashion. So deferring some CapEx, I think, is a responsible way to go. I won't repeat myself on 1 hour parking in Leederville. I think we've spoken of that often enough. So I'm certainly in support of the amendment with regard to the free car parking, the rate increase of 3%. That is still a rate increase. Each year there's a rate increase that gets locked in, and then the following year along comes another increase. So we shouldn't forget that generally rates go up every single year. So I am very supportive of the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Loden.
Maybe a question to Councillor Iopolo. So if I'm understanding correctly, a 1.5% rate decrease is $600,000, and then the 1 hour free reintroduction in Leederville is $400,000, so it's $1 million. So that in our LTFP, that's $10 million over the plan. Are you proposing to amend the LTFP as well, or to leave it as is?
Yeah. I don't support the long-term financial plan on the basis for the same reasons as this. So I was just going to deal with one at a time.
So, the challenge I have with this is we have a long-term financial plan that outlines how we can fund our asset renewal. And if we don't have the funds planned to do it, then how do we, how can council financially be supporting the city's needs if we're not funding the renewal that's required? We either have to decide to do less, like not do the CapEx. If we defer it, that's still got to be funded, right? So where does the 10 million, whether this 10 million either savings or increased rates come from?
I'm just taking it as a rhetorical question because we're not really supposed to have a question and answer between council members. Thank you.
So, okay, I guess I'm gonna make my comments. $10 million is a lot of money. Either we increase rates by 8% next year because we've reduced them by 1.5 plus additional 1% for the 1 hour free, or continue with a graduation over that 10-year. But we know how much money we need to spend to maintain our assets. Unless we're going to have less of them, then we need that money. Now, you either do it now or you kick that can down the road. And I don't support kicking the can down the road. On the 1 hour free, I feel we're at risk of a fallacy error here. So there is a correlation between a reduction in parking and the 1 hour free being removed. But that doesn't necessarily mean causation, because things have changed in the last year. A year ago, interest rates were 4% lower, inflation was under 3%, cost of living was a lot lower, and people had lots more discretionary spend. So if you want to chart a correlation, you can show an inverse correlation with inflation, you can show an inverse correlation with interest rates, and you can show a direct correlation with people's disposable income, all of which are probably going to have an impact on people's utilisation of town centres, going and buying a coffee, going out for lunch and all that sort of stuff. So when I look at myself as a person who has a mortgage, the thing that concerns me out of all of these things would be more like interest rates. If you've got a $500,000 mortgage that at 4%, that's $20,000 a year that you have additional in costs today. If you went and parked in a city car park every day of the year for $1 for 1 hour, that's $365. So for me, from my perspective, the issue that I see that is driving this, and this is perception of consumer behaviour, not fact, is that the economic circumstances have changed, and that's what's driving the majority of this. Other people will have different financial circumstances. You might not have a mortgage, you might be a retired person or something like that. But then I would still think things like inflation and the cost of living are more likely to be driving your thought processes than a 1 hour free. So I think there's probably some level of impact caused by the removal of the 1 hour free, but I don't think we can draw that direct attribution to that. Now, I'm supportive of the reintroduction of 1 hour free in North Perth and Mount Worley. I don't think it's going to make this huge difference, but we don't see the same level of demand in those places as we do in Leederville. But I do see that it makes sense to retain it in Leederville. There's much higher parking utilisation there. I personally, even though I go through Leederville all the time, don't really utilise it because I struggle to find a park a lot of the time. So something that helps to increase churn there, I think is actually going to be beneficial. We also have the proposal to sell the Leederville car parks, which is going to rapidly change that whole dynamic in that space as well. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councillors, Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Look, I don't support the amendment. I certainly don't support an amendment that is not specific enough in to provide me with the detail to understand which of the pre-commitments that are set out in our capital works program are not proposed to not be funded, which of the assumptions in the proposed long-term financial plan or the existing long-term financial plan to be changed. So I'm always happy to consider amendments that come forward, but I would expect after this length of time debating a budget, and as was already previously said, where administration have been very responsive to questions, and then also where we have a existing suite of documents that perhaps would have allowed, you know, an understanding of which particular efforts or pre-commitments would not be delivered, could have been included here for consideration. So I certainly, this is not something that I can contemplate. And I think that I think it introduces risk, and I'm not interested in that. I think that the challenge we have here is that we want our financial management and our budget preparation and our planning to be both responsive and predictable. right? So we need to be able to have a system where we do an annual budget and where we do mid-year reviews so that we can understand what the current circumstances are and plan around them. But we also need to be able to give some surety to our community as to what's coming up and what they can expect and where the works that might really interest them are going to sit. And that's what we do in our 4-year capital works program. It's what we do in our 4-year corporate business plan. And that's also what we do at a higher level in our long-term financial plan. And I think provides surety to the community. It also means that what we're doing is we're not, I guess, grabbing onto, particular fads and we're not really it forces us to consider what the long-term impact is of decisions that may be made on an evening such as this. I think that we have, and when I say we, I mean, Team Vincent have improved in our maturity in that over the time that I've sat in this chamber. And it's actually something that I'm really proud of. And I wouldn't, I think that there is ample opportunity over a 6-month budget workshop period to look at our capital works program and identify items that are not to be delivered and to really consider where they're going to go if we're going to have a different position than what is already set out in our long-term financial plan and what is already sort of set as our baseline in terms of our assumptions. So no, I'm not supportive of the the amendment. I'm also not supportive of reducing reserves because ultimately I think that we are not a city that carries a high level of reserves. And as sitting in this chamber when we had COVID and being on our COVID committee, that the local governments that had good reserves were able to ride through COVID a lot smoother. And so I'm not interested in facing whatever the next big thing is, but, without having reserves. And I also really do believe that we need to be able to have reserves to deliver on our pre-commitments to our community. We need to be able to have our reserves in order to be able to say, yes, we can do underground power, that we're going to be able to make assurances to our community that we can take advantage of opportunities and that we can be a sustainable organisation. So we actually need to grow our reserves where appropriate to deliver on the objectives that our community sets us and to be able to run the City of Vincent as a responsible organisation that lives beyond the single cycle. This is what the state government said to local governments that we had to do, and I think that we're starting to lean into it at the City of Vincent, and it is for the benefit of everybody involved that we can still be responsive, but there is a level of predictability here. Maybe I'm boring, but that's what I like. So I don't support this amendment that's come forward this evening. Thank you.
Councillors, Councillor Warner.
Thank you. I could say I support part of this amendment. I think my views on the first hour free in parking has been clearly stated, and I'm keen to bring this back across all of Vincent, including for non-ratepayers in Leederville. I don't believe we need to spend $75,000, however, on a marketing campaign, because I believe Mr. Greg over there would actually be able to champion the word as it is, and the word would get out. So I don't think we can, essentially, there's almost 25% of that back again. So I support that. And I'm glad that the $2 minimum fee curbside parking amendment went through earlier. I just want to say that I appreciate particularly what Councillor Hallett said about placing our 4% interest rate proposal in context, because when we hear these numbers, we're not actually looking, a lot of people aren't looking at how they actually apply to the small amount that they were coming at. So I appreciate that. I feel like coming into council after I've been here 2 years, I feel like we are a bit of the victim of the kicking the can down the road, to use that term that's been kicked around a lot tonight. We have been historically underrated, and we have identified our priorities through the SCP, and I believe that we can work towards those using this. I also think we need to consider that we are a local government. We are not a small business. We have different priorities. So we need to focus on our long-term plans like that and what we actually need to deliver. So I guess summing up, yes, I support part of this, but not all of it.
Councillor Castle. Thank you, Mayor. I'm not supportive of this amendment for similar reasons to Councillor Gontaszewski. I'm not prepared to consider something that proposes a $1 million reduction in the budget on the night of adoption. We've had a lot of time to deal with this. There's a lot of detail that's been provided to council, and I'm not prepared to support something that is unspecific in how we would make up that shortfall. I think that the issue of 1 hour free, we have been talking about that a lot, particularly in the last few months, and we have taken on board some of the evidence that has been presented. I would say we, as Councillor Loden pointed out, we have some data that might suggest a certain correlation. It certainly is not significant enough to make me certain about causation, and there are a number of factors at play. We have moved in the areas where we can see a significant impact, being Mount Lawley and North Perth. But Leederville is a different situation for a number of reasons. One, demand, and secondly, the impending changes to the car parking arrangements there. I would also note in the fees and charges that throughout this budget year, we have the ability to remove that $1 fee because of the $0 discount that is included in the fees and charges. So we have some capacity in the next 12 months to consider whether there is a good reason to remove the dollar for the first hour. But at this point in time, I'm not prepared to do that. And I think it's significant. I actually made this point last year at the budget that what we're talking about is a 1% in rates, which in this proposal is being borne by the wider community and not purely by our ratepayers. So I'm really conscious of the fact that we try to spread the cost of running this local government amongst the users of the services of the local government. Our ratepayers do benefit from most of those services, but also people who don't live in Vincent take advantage of our town centres, of our facilities, of our libraries, of our pools, and where appropriate, they bear some of the cost of that. And in this situation, I think it is appropriate that we spread that cost amongst the wider community and not simply concentrate that on our ratepayers. I think there's always a question when you're talking about amending a budget, removing any amount, let alone $1 million, as to what is that going to be. We could, as Councillor Apollo suggested, defer some of the capital works, but it has to be done at some point. We have a history. Last year, we talked at length about addressing the low asset sustainability ratio that we had, that was a considerable problem for the city, and that we were finally in a position to address that. I'm not prepared to go backwards on that. And I think that was hard fought to get there. And I'm certainly not interested in looking at this council putting ourselves in worse financial health than we got to last year, particularly as we embark on a major project like underground power. So for those reasons, I'm not prepared to support this, and I'm happy with the budget as it stands currently. Councillors, perhaps I'm the only one that hasn't spoken. Gives me a good opportunity to talk about attachment 7 to the budget papers, which was a new addition after I requested some further information on the capital expenditure and the carry forwards. And I think this is an excellent example of what we're actually dealing with here. We've had so many discussions and so much information provided to us on how we rate per year, but if we don't take the funding towards a project, we can't start the project. If you look at that attachment, which begins at page 300 74 of the combined agenda or page 98 of the individual item, it lists all of the items that are being carried forward. It provides what balance has been committed, what stage it's at, and comments on its status. And some of the comments on status of projects are things like works scheduled from mid-June 2023, external factors waiting on Western Power approvals, Heritage Council input required, demolition is progressing, community consultation being undertaken on a number of these items. The tender has been granted in May. Further planting in winter will occur. Condition report has been completed, ordered under our vehicle and fleet, ordered, waiting delivery. These projects have started. Yes, they are carry forwards, but we've been able to commence the projects because we took the rates, not just the rates, we took all of the funding in that funding pool and we put them against projects. If we hadn't done that, these would all be at ground zero and we would have to start and try to get those projects happening within that one financial year. That is very difficult, particularly at the current time when we're dealing with things like fleet vehicles taking much longer to be delivered and some of the issues that you have with contracting people. But this attachment clearly shows that carry forwards have got works happening against them. Those projects have started and that wouldn't have been able to occur if we hadn't taken if we hadn't funded them in the budget. So I think that is really the critical point. There's been so much information provided around this. When you say you don't understand it or people make all these comments and it doesn't make sense, this is factual, this is tabulated, this is clearly, you know, evidence-based. I just don't know what the problem is. It's here clearly before us and it's presented to us in various formats, in charts, in spreadsheets, etc. And I don't think that anyone in 2023 should feel a victim of carrying the can down the road. Perhaps that's how I felt in 2013. And we've done a huge amount of work over the last 10 years to actually get into this position. And by then removing money from the budget, which is going to help us continue to maintain our assets, will really mean that we're doing that, kicking the can down the road. And Councillor Loden has talked about stripping $10 million from the long-term financial plan. Anyone who wants to take away First Hour Free and Leadable has to then amend the long-term financial plan and increase that rate increase to 6.5% next year. Are you prepared to do that part of the deal? So I'm just feeling that this information has been provided. It is clear. It is not ambiguous in any way. We've requested so much information. We've had 6 months of budget workshops. When I experienced that issue of the budget black hole and we had to take measures to reduce the budget, we went through the budget line by line in great detail in that function room over there with the administration of the time, and we actually added up what it was that was going to go, and we made decisions as a council about what things we were going to continue to fund and what we weren't. We didn't advocate that we'd just say we'd send the CEO to do that task. That's our role. That is our fundamental role as a council, to make decisions about budget expenditure. And we've been talking about this budget for nearly 6 months and we've had opportunity for this discussion to happen. So in terms of Leadable and the car parks, the CEO sent us an email today which showed what the percentage of First Hour Free transactions were in 2022 versus 2023. And there is a fundamental difference between Leadable and the other car parks where we're looking to reduce that. The percentage of First Hour Free transactions in 2022 in the Avenue car park were 53%. In 2023, those 1 hour transactions were 57%. 1 hour transactions in the Frame Court car park, 37% in 2022, 55% in 2023. In all other car parks, we have seen reductions in the First Hour Free as a percentage of those car parking transactions. Again, evidence-based data before us presented to show us. So also just commenting that Leadable car park is at 85% occupancy, and in accordance with our accessible city strategy, that's when we start looking at pricing. That's all I have to say because I've reached the end of my time. Is there any further comments on the amendment? All right, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that lost. Are there any further amendments? Is there any further discussion on the debate on the annual budget for those who have not already spoken? Mover, do you wish to exercise your right of reply? No, okay, I'll put the annual budget 2023-24. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Opolo and Councillor Alexander voting against. I declare the annual budget carried. Next item is 11.6, the underground power financial model. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor. Great to see this come forward, and as the Mayor outlined, great to see that it's all timed with everything else we're going to do. I'm really happy to see that we've got a plan for this going forward. I do want to comment on the question raised from the gallery by Ashley LaFontaine. So my comment on this is that the funds that we utilised for the underground power reserve are funds that are basically used to provide a circular loan. So yes, those funds have been obtained from ratepayers in advance, but that is to help us maintain the financial integrity of the City of Vincent because our rates levels are so low, because we've historically rated so low. And so we need those funds to make sure that we don't go insolvent. Those funds will be used to fund the underground power reserve, but then cycle back into the coffers of the City of Vincent, and then will ultimately be used on things like the sustainability of our assets and so forth. So if the underground power program had not come along, we still ultimately would have at some point needed to raise these funds. It might not have been might not have been last year, but it would have been required at some point in time over the next 10 years. And the longer we wait to raise those rates, the greater the increase that we would require to then provide the funds that we need over that time frame. So I don't think that'll probably satisfy the query, but that's my feedback on that item there. Thank you.
Councillors, Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Nicole. Yes, I'm very pleased with this. I just need to be clear, along with Councillor Loden, there is no levy. I'm very satisfied that people aren't being double charged, and I am not quite sure why we're seeing the continuation of this argument. Once again, I believe that information has been provided into the public forum and through questions answered by administration to confirm that, and I'm very satisfied with that. Ultimately, we have to make a series of assumptions in order to be able to satisfy ourselves as councillors that entering into this program, this radical and incredible program of underground power across the City of Vincent that's going to allow us to green our streets and assist us in managing climate change. I think we need to be able to assure ourselves that we have done the thinking at this stage of the game, and I'm satisfied that this recommendation and the model that's set out through the papers meets that threshold for me at this stage. This is ambitious, and there will need to be additional levels of certainty that will come over time, but I do love a plan, and I think that I am someone that has quite often been happy to sort of say, let's wait until everything is completely fixed before we move ahead. And I have to say that can result in missing opportunities. This is not an opportunity that we want to miss. And I think that we as an organisation are mature enough now to be able to say that this is something that is manageable within the financial constraints that we face, and that it is something that we are able to commit to move forward with, noting that there will be additional information and certainty that will come through, each stage of the project. So I think the other thing that I want to say is I agree with Councillor Loden that we have a need to ensure that we have reserves. Once there is no more underground power to do, and there is funds that have been paid back into that reserves, a future council will make a decision as to what to do with those reserve funds. And if you'd like to know what that might look like, please look at our long-term financial plan and our corporate business plan and our capital works program, our sustainability strategies, our economic development strategies, our communications, public open space strategies, and our precinct plans. We have all of those documents under, jazzier names, but they all are here for the City of Vincent, and I trust that we will, because we have a program of reviewing and updating those documents in consultation with the community, that when the time comes and there's no underground power, that there will be some documents that set out what the community expects their elected members to do with those funds. But the important thing is we need to have them. Thank you.
Councillors? Councillor Castle?
Thank you, Mayor. Very excited to see this come forward and really want to thank administration for the vast amount of work that's been done to get to this point. Not just in developing this financial model, which, has obviously been a key part of this project, but also that proactive negotiation that's happened with Western Power to get us to a point where we can plan for the rollout of an enormous project for the entire city, and we can afford to do it. That's no mean feat. And I think the fact that we have this presented to us in the same meeting as our budget, our long-term financial plan, capital works, corporate business plan, all of those documents is a great credit to administration. I think that this strikes that balance between progressing with these projects as quickly as we can and as quickly as Western Power is capable of doing, and doing that in a financially sustainable way that allows all of our ratepayers, no matter their financial situation, to access this. What we have been trying to avoid is imposing a service charge on ratepayers that will put them into hardship, and that they will not be able to meet in the year that they will be required to pay that service charge. And that's always a balancing act, because it requires that cash flow considerations that we've had to have. And I'm really pleased to see the plan that has come forward that has that balance right, in my opinion. I think, as others have said, we have had this conversation around the 2.1% charge last year and around previous underground power projects that have happened in the city. And I think that it has more than been asked and answered multiple times in this chamber and by email. But just to reiterate what other councillors have said, the money that is being levied or charged through rates in order to fund this project will be used for the benefit of our community. It's just a question of timing. So when we're talking about the Highgate East project that happened many years ago, that had a payback period built into it. That was funded by municipal funds that had come from rates. The fact that it may not have come in that particular year or in the year before is immaterial. It came from funds that were to be used for the benefit of the community. And the same will happen here. We will collect the rates. We will use it in order to facilitate this project. And when the funds are available again, they will be used to fund our assets, to fund our services, to fund improvements, to put on events, to do all of the many things that we do in Vincent. So it's really just a question of timing. So I'm really happy with the proposal that's been made. I'm happy to see the level of detail that we have and look forward to even more detail when that's available, as I'm sure that will give our ratepayers more certainty and the ability to plan for those charges, and I look forward to the next stage.
Councillors, Councillor Apollo.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have an amendment, but which I'll put forward later, but I want to speak to this. I'm probably going to be in the dissenting opinion on this as well, probably because of my financial background. I see this differently. I see that everybody wants underground power, including myself. So I think that's undisputed. The question when I look at this underground power financial model is for me, it's like the Trojan horse. Everybody welcomes it at the beginning, but when you start to peel back the layers, then there's suddenly a big surprise. What I fear here is that this subsidy, and it's no doubt a subsidy in my mind, absolutely. What we are doing with this model is providing a very, very generous payback deferral mechanism for 70% of ratepayers only. I mean, if it was 100% of ratepayers, then it wouldn't be inequitable. But 70% means that the city is going to undertake significant debt. It will do that to fund for the benefit of this 70% or up to 70% of ratepayers, so that they can pay back their contribution to install underground power over a 4-year period. What this means is that funds, the interest and these funds are being diverted to this subsidy, and that in the meantime, these funds and the interest is not available to reduce operational costs and therefore reduce ratepayers' rates throughout this long project, 10, 12 years. So we can say that we can make an argument that it's not a subsidy because at the end of the day, this money all comes back to us, but we are funding something for 10 to 12 years. So this is where my concern is. I think that as I've stated in the workshops, I felt that the payback period was probably too long, or that people should have been required to make a contribution up front, which would have dramatically reduced the impost on the City of Vincent and therefore the funds that it would have to loan. I think that we've had to make compromises with the rollout schedule that Western Power itself has proposed, that we've actually pushed back the rollout because of funding concerns, because of our debt levels. And this means, and what it's likely to mean, in my view, is that the amount that every ratepayer is going to pay to install underground power is going to be higher, because suddenly we are pushing the project out further, and all the rolling contracts that Western Power would have done to make it very economical in terms of its rollout has been extended. So I think you lose some economies of scale there in terms of cost efficiencies from doing it as quickly as possible. And the other reason why I don't support this item is I did request the funding model, which was declined, and I felt that would have given me some additional comfort about some of the sensitivities where I was concerned about. You can run the argument that that's not my place, but it's also not my place to tell what capital expenditure should be deferred. So can't have it both ways depending on the item. So I left it to the administration. So when the time is right and everyone else has spoken, I'd like to propose an amendment which was requested by a ratepayer. But in terms of the substantive, I can't support this Trojan horse. Thanks.
Councillors, look, underground power, I think we really have to acknowledge that this is an incredible opportunity. It will be transformational for the City of Vincent. For a long time, it seemed unaffordable. When I used to go to Craig Wilson and say, our former engineer, can you please tell me how much it's going to cost to underground power across the City of Vincent? It ran into I think it was about $120 million that we talk about. So to be able to have access to this program and to be able to do consecutive rollout across Vincent so that no one feels that they're not being provided the opportunity is just incredible. In terms of the transformation, I mean, the tree canopy will flourish. We will have entirely new light poles. We'll have LED lighting. Considerable savings to the city in relation to pruning canopy and lighting the city, given that we're still running on the old, I can't remember what they call them, Western Power, the haloid lights, yes, that fade off over time. And a lot of complaints come in from our neighbourhood about dark streets. And I think that's a combination of lighting poles being on power poles where you can't really select where they're placed, and also the lights fade over time until they eventually cease functioning, and it's only then that Western Power will come and put an LED lamp in. So this is a significant benefit to the entire community in terms of canopy, the biodiversity that will bring, the opportunities to grow trees in different locations, and cost savings, incredible cost savings, which we'll start to see have an impact on the long-term financial plan once we get to a sort of critical mass of underground power being installed. So it's extremely exciting. Look, we've come up with this model based on what we can borrow and what we have in reserves. And I think the fundamental thing that we've tried to avoid is to take any money from rates. We took 2.1% in rates, not a service charge, not a levy. That's been absolutely 100% clearly clarified that it was part of the rates. And just to highlight what that actually looked like, $772,000 with a cost to the median residential ratepayer of $29, a one-off payment into the city's reserve to allow us to be in a stronger financial position. But when you consider the amount of funds required to actually deliver this project, it is really a drop in the ocean, and that all of the funds coming into this project will eventually come back out once we roll through the projects, and that will go back into investment in our community for the greater good. So look, I also do want to say that issue that Ashley Lafontaine continues to raise has been answered. And I think it is being quite divisive to put it out there as a fee or a service levy when that has been answered. When the leaflets went into letterboxes, I had a number of residents contact me at the time and asked me a lot of questions, and I provided them with the information, and they were very satisfied when I explained it to them, and they couldn't understand why it had been put to them in that way. So I would just really ask Ashley to consider the information that has been provided and to understand that this is not a service fee or a levy, and that those getting underground power will be paying for the underground power that they receive. They'll get that payback period in the same way that Highgate East residents had. And this is really about fairness and equity to all of our ratepayers. I just encourage people to not put divisive issues to residents in this way. So look, it's a very exciting project. I'm not really sure what the alternative is to what we're providing in terms of payback periods. We can't take a loan from the WA Treasury Corporation and add additional interest onto it. We can only provide that as we receive it from WATC. So it's not up to us to make it less attractive. It is what it is, and it's a good thing that we can underwrite this, because essentially at the end of the day, we are providing an infrastructure for the community that benefits not just the individual at their house, but also the community at large in terms of the transformational impact that it will have on our neighbourhoods and the cost to the city. Any further comments, Councillor Alexander?
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Look, I'm just interested in getting some more information, because people talk in very broad terms of subsidies and equity and all those sorts of terms, and how there's going to be better trees and canopies, and I think everyone's excited about underground power. Everyone I talk to certainly wants to have underground power, but I'm also very interested in some of the exact figures, and perhaps I could ask through the Mayor, the CEO. We talk about some 70% paying over 4 years. So how do we get some of the figures, like an example of Highgate or North Perth or Hawthorn or whatever it is, so we can see what the exact figures are? Ross talks about Trojan horses. I don't know about that. I'm not that sophisticated. I'm interested in hearing some of the exact language of how much it's going to cost for family X who are sitting in North Perth, and this is going to happen. And is it true that the 30% are somewhat going to be subsidising the 70%? So I'm interested in, and I hear the broad explanation of how it's going to work, but I don't see any examples of household X or household Y in a particular set of circumstances. So if I could request to just see some of that very basic information about what it is going to cost a family, what is, is it a scare tactic that 30% are going to be supporting 70%? Everyone wants underground power. Everyone wants tree canopies, all of that. So, I find that just distracting from some of the financial information. So I just like, from this particular representative of ratepayers, to actually see some of the detail that's going to happen to real ratepayers in real time.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to sort of clarify the nature of the report to council. So most other councils considering this are very different to our situation. Most councils would have been approached by Western Power like we were 18 months ago, and they would have signed up an MOU for one project, maybe two projects. So then we would have been dealing with one project in half of one of our suburbs, and we would have been doing what we're doing now, which is going through a detailed design process, and then just one at a time, going through high-level cost estimates, and then to detailed design, more detailed cost estimates, and then doing a funding agreement for that model, for that project area. Our approach is very different to all other councils. We were invited by Western Power to participate in that initial 3 project areas as part of signing that first MOU, which would have covered a significant part of the city. But given the enthusiasm and demand from our residents to deliver underground power everywhere, we took the initiative to engage with Western Power to ask to work with us, to show us, to see how we could partner with them over 10 years to deliver underground power in every single residential street of the city of Vincent. So that's why you've got such a large long-term financial model being proposed. And we're doing that at a very high level based on the high level of estimates from Western Power, what they call the E30s.
Sorry, David, can I just interrupt? Because you're talking about exactly your words then, high level. You know, I understand that to some degree, but it still doesn't result in someone really understanding what it's going to mean for their residents, for their area, for their tranche, because I think there's going to be 12 or 13 tranches in this whole thing. So, and everyone is enthusiastic. So we're pleased that the city's put its hand up and at the front of the queue, if you like, because, you know, Western Power want to engage because largely across the city we have, you know, old wires and poles. And so it's cheaper in the main for a lot of people. All I'm wanting to understand is, what is it going to cost? When someone's talking to their husband or their wife or their neighbour or whatever, they're going to say, we're getting it in the street. So what's it going to cost you? Is it 3,000? Is it 10,000? And what's this about 30%, perhaps supporting 70% who are paying it off over 4 years? So you are talking in a very high level. Is it possible to get some detail?
Through Mayor Cole, the answer is yes, but the answer is not now. The model is about the high-level estimates over the course of the 8 projects. Western Power is already undertaking their detailed design work for the first 2 projects. We'll get that detailed design by the end of this year. That will go down to a E10 estimate, plus or minus 10%, which will then inform a funding agreement, which goes to council. Then council will have much more accurate estimates for those 2 project areas. But until Western Power spent 12 months and better part of $1 million doing the detailed design for each project area, we don't get down to that level of detail.
What we're doing is we've got a high level commitment, but people are not, they've got to take this on trust. We don't know what an individual ratepayer might be paying.
Through Mayor Cole, no, we don't have that level of specificity. What's the report?
Sorry, David, is there inbounds? Is there between 3 and 10, or is there, you know, and I want to vote yes for this, but it's just a bit hard hearing this at high level, everyone's enthusiasm for it. And, you know, I don't think we need to talk about everyone wants it, but I would just like to know more about the realistic cost, not the high, well, even the high level numbers haven't, I've heard 89 million or something at one stage, but.
Through Mayor Cole, that's right. The cost will vary per property and will vary per project area. So the ranges at this stage over the course of 8 projects to cover the entire city of Vincent vary from as low as 3,000 per property up to around about 9,000 per property.
Yeah,
So a
look, I
property
think
owner
I
could-
understand.
Could be anywhere in between 3 and 9.
If there's an area where everything's degraded, it's going to be less. And if it's we just really want to have it, but everything is good, it's going to cost more. But nevertheless, I'm asking as a representative of ratepayers and council member, could we have some detail of even look, I don't know, maybe I can have a chat to you after about what.
Yeah,
What might
and
work.
through Mayor Cole, we just won't have that. Western Power have to spend 12 months doing that detailed design by an engineering team through each project area. They'll deliver us those more accurate, specific costs for the first 2 project areas at the end of this year.
Well, David,
And that'll
could
go
you,
to
could you
council.
just perhaps explain one thing to me? How is the 30% going to support the 70%?
Through Mayor Cole, I don't think I would ever have characterized it as a subsidy. When we issue rates each year, we give ratepayers an option. You can pay up front and they pay it up front, or they can pay it over quarterly, or they can pay it and they go down to monthly, or they can pay monthly. We offer payment terms, and that's something we offer as part of customer service. This is a bigger upfront fee, but based on our experience with people varying depending on their property value and whether they've got a lot of properties or small number of properties and people's capacity to pay. Some ratepayers pay their rates up front as soon as we issue the rate notice for the entire 12-month period. Others choose payment terms. I don't see it any differently to what we're doing with rates, because the charge for underground power is a service charge, which is akin to the annual rates we issue to property owners in the city.
It's probably also worth mentioning, we're not asking residents to pay anything at this juncture. We're simply saying that we've worked out what we can borrow, what we can afford in terms of a payback period based on our borrowings and on our reserves. Whether that can afford for 70% of ratepayers to take up that payback period, and that we'll be using the underground power reserve and Tamala Park land sales, and that properties will be levied a service charge based on their specific costs. But because we're not at the E10 valuations, we can't actually tell the residents what that is until Western Power does their detailed design work for each project. And then they look at the individual household and see whether they have things like a green dome, which will bring down their costs. So that's just really just working through what's the recommendation says. They're the things that we're being asked to consider.
And through Mayor Cole, just to add, anyone who seeks the 4-year payback term will be charged an interest rate, which we're essentially passing on. So anyone seeking those deferred terms pay 100% of the interest costs for those deferred terms. The 30% who pay up front, give or take 30%, whatever the exact number will be at the time, will avoid those interest costs.
Any further questions or comments in relation to the substantive motion? Okay, Councillor Apollo, did you wish to move an amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I don't really need to talk to it. I'm assuming everyone's read it. It's coming directly from a resident and concerned ratepayer, just wanting to note that about.
Sorry, is this your amendment or a ratepayer's amendment?
It's my amendment based on feedback from the community.
Okay,
Yeah.
I need to get a seconder before you start
Sure.
speaking to it. Is there a seconder, Councillor Alexander?
Thanks for clarifying that, Mayor. So what this amendment is doing is just really acknowledging that the initial Western Power rollout of what was proposed has been changed, and it's a result of the funding model and the debt levels or debt capacity that the city can bear to fund its the financial model. So it's really noting that fact for transparency to the community, and requesting that that a annual report, status report of the underground power project comes each year to council, proposed to be made. And that certain things would be included in that report to ensure that council is fully aware of the progress of the key parameters listed in paragraph 4. Thank you.
Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Look, I think I've made all my concerns and also joy about underground power. So it's extremely complex, and trying to understand the long-term financial plan is quite difficult. And I support the amendments here. That will go some way to shining a light on it. Thanks.
Councillors, any comments in relation to the amendment? No comments? Any questions? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that lost with Councillor Uplow and Councillor Alexander voting in favour. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further questions or comments for those who haven't already spoken? Okay, I'll put the underground power financial model. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried with Councillor Uplow and Councillor Alexander voting against. Would you like to go to the long-term financial plan, given that we're in that space, or should we go back to 9.4? Any preference? Long-term financial plan. Okay, 11.4, adoption of the long-term financial plan 2023-24 to 2032-33. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we've talked about this stuff enough. I'm supportive of the long-term financial plan. Thank you.
Councillor Gontaszewski.
Yes, I'm supportive of the long-term financial plan and recognise it's a critical piece of work, and they're very pleased to see it coming forward tonight.
Councillors. Councillor Uplow.
Thank you. In the words of John Nash, I think it needs revision, but I think the main reasons I've already stipulated, and that is the over budgeting of CapEx. I think also, my experience in strategy and finance would be that you would start with a position of what your strategic projects are. What do you want to do about your key assets like the Beatty Park and Leederville Oval? What is our position on our portfolio in terms of land sales and acquisitions? So some type of property portfolio strategy. Another one would be, what is our position on diversifying our revenue streams in a responsible manner, moving away from reliance on rates? I think that that's something that is having a strategy around that. Excuse me. Is something. So I would be starting with all these strategic projects and then working out what the plan could look like. Whereas the way that this long-term financial plan has, and it's not picking on this one, but it's historically done the same way every year, is it's really talking about a base case scenario and an alternate, and it's defining those based on the level of rating strategy. Like one has got a moderate rating strategy and another one's got a higher rating strategy. I really would have preferred for our long-term financial plan to be really based around our position on strategic projects and having discussions around that, particularly around scope and particularly around cost initiatives that the city might wish to embark on in the longer term to actually save taxpayers' money, whether that's on a procurement policy or whether that's looking at those types of initiatives. I had another example, it just escaped me. So these are the types of things that I would normally equate with a strategic informing document, rather than just working out what our rating strategy should be. So I'm almost certain that I'll probably be in and again, a dissenting opinion, but I found it difficult to support this. And there's a lot of items that really are coming all together, which influence the budget. And I would have preferred these to come at a different time, because then we get 4 documents that are all intersecting. And so if you disagree with the position of where we landed on the budget, which I've already articulated, it's very hard then to support these other, what we would call informing strategies, because I've got issues that are both with the long-term plans from a financial sense and the annual budget, just looking at the 1-year window. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Councillors. Look, the long-term financial plan is part of the integrated planning and reporting framework. So this works in tandem with the strategic community plan. It is sort of, effectively underpinning our annual budget. When we've gone through our annual budgeting workshops, we've also considered the long-term financial plan at the same time. And then we have the expression of the projects through the corporate business plan. So this is supposed to be a suite of documents as integrated planning and reporting framework outlines. I actually find this to be a really useful document. And I think if anyone in the community wanted to sort of get a good overview of where we're sitting financially, where we've come from, what the priorities are, and what some of those new revenue sources and sort of just strategic decisions are, it's all here in the front end of the document, and talks about the strategic context and new revenue and debt reduction and the assumptions and modelling. And just because we've got the rating strategy, it doesn't mean that those things aren't then embedded through the long-term financial plan modelling. We haven't been able to do things like model what might happen if we see the realisation of the Leederville car parks request for proposal, because that's still yet to be fully formed. But I think that where there is a project that has this incorporates things like how we've modelled our borrowing for underground power. So these things work together because they inform one another, and that's the way that the integrated planning and reporting framework has been designed to work. So yeah, I did actually really enjoy reading the long-term financial plan this year. I thought it was a really good overview. And I think it's very helpful for the community to actually look at this, see where we're heading. And I think when you start reading things like the long-term financial plan in conjunction with the 4-year capital works program, you get a real sense of what projects are coming up and where the priorities lie. So I found that to be a particularly informative document, and I'm happy to support it. Any further comments on the LTFP? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried, with Councillor Opolo and Councillor Alexander voting against. While we're on the financials, I think if we keep going on this thread and go to 11.7 event sponsorship, Councillor Warner with her financial interest, we'll just need to give a moment to leave. So can I please have a mover and seconder for 11.7 event sponsorship 23-24? Moved by Councillor Hallett, seconded by Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. Really excited to support this. I guess in particular, post-COVID, in the ongoing COVID impact that we have.
Coping times.
Coping times. It's been really nice to see the number of events that have come forward for sponsorship this year. Massive diversity throughout the year. And it's a great privilege, I think, for us to be able to be facilitating these events across the City of Vincent. I don't really have any specific comments beyond there are a couple that are referred to an amendment to change the amount. And so I'm happy to move that after people have discussed the substantive.
Councillor Gontaszewski.
Happy to talk amendments.
Any further comments on the substantive motion? Okay, the floor is yours for an amendment.
Yeah, I'd like to move the amendment on the greyish blue.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by councillor Castle.
So this is a recommendation to amend the recommendation to fund an additional 10,000 through a reduction in the closing surplus. And this is adding 5,000 to the Revelation Perth International Film Festival and an extra 5,000 to the Pride WA Fair Day. Both, I guess, iconic events within Vincent. And I would just note, particularly, I guess, in terms of Pride WA, Fair Day is a fantastic event that, particularly right now when there's been attacks and quite vitriolic debate internationally, but across Australia as well, around particularly transgender and gender diverse folks. This type of event is all the more important for creating visibility for queer community across Vincent and I guess champion our city as being an inclusive and safe space for folks of all sexualities and gender expressions. So very keen to see that supported. And also obviously Revelation is a fantastic film festival, one of its kind, and it's fantastic to have it in Perth.
Councillor Castle. Thank you. Yes, I'm supportive of these amendments. I think both of these events are very Vincent in the way that we see ourselves and the way our community sees the services that we provide and the support that we want to provide, particularly to communities like the Pride WA community. I think that having that event in Hyde Park has been a fantastic success over many years, and has also provided an event for a large number of people. I think we need to recognise the impact that this has both on the day, with I think approximately 37,000 people attending last year, and on the support that it provides for the community and the opportunity for people to express themselves and feel safe in a council that has for many, many, many years supported the community in a strong way. So I'm very happy to support the increase in relation to Pride WA to Fair Day, and also in relation to Revelation Film Festival. I think we've heard some information about the difficulty it is to put on these events and the rising costs, and acknowledging that that extra $5,000 might make that event a bit more sustainable. I do have another amendment to propose, but I will wait until this one is finished and then move to that one. Councillors, Councillor Oppolo.
Just a question. Has the total been, we've increased, this amendment is increased by 10,000, but has the total been changed? Or is, just to clarify. And my second question was, why we put events here with a 0 next to it?
Through Mayor Cole, those events are being proposed for 0 funding. They made an application for X amount. Yes.
So councillors, I'll speak to this. Look, I've been approached by Pride WA, and I'm actually not sure whether I've gone far enough in this amendment in putting to you that we increase their funding, because the president, Michael Felix, contacted me and talked to me about the fact that not only are they seeking to improve the access and inclusion that they provide to Pride Fair Day, but that they also, you know, they go through the culture counts where they really analyse the social and economic benefit of their event. And they talked about the fact that the analytics from Culture Counts says that this has an economic impact of more than $1.1 million, which is very significant, to the point that the City of Perth has highlighted in their report that's going to their council in June on major events and festival sponsorship that they would see the benefit of Pride Fair Day going to the City of Perth so that they could have all Pride Fest events in the City of Perth, which is a little disheartening when we have a $250,000 budget and the City of Perth has a $3 million budget. So that's the reality of what we face when an event like this just becomes so exceptionally popular, so well attended. I believe the home for Pride Fair Day is in Hyde Park. I believe it's in the City of Vincent. We tried it at Birdwood and it didn't have the same atmosphere. And those last two events at Hyde Park, particularly now that the fencing's gone down and that you no longer have to pay to come in, it's just absolutely transformed the event. And it was probably one of the most magical events in terms of the level of joy, the level of inclusion. Personally sitting at the stall, talking to many neurodiverse people. This is not just about sexuality and gender difference. This is about wheelchair users. There's interpreters. There's an absolute feeling that everybody is welcome at Pride Fair Day, and it just makes it the most wonderful event. So I would be desperately sad that if this was lost from the City of Vincent. I believe its home is at Hyde Park. I've put in there an additional 5,000. I thought perhaps it should have been an additional 10. But, you know, we will never be able to compete with City of Perth on money alone. But in terms of spirit and loyalty and long-term partnership, I don't think that anyone could dispute how we feel about our LGBTIQ plus community and our services that are here in the City of Vincent. In relation to Revelation, we all received an email from Richard Soeda, the director of the festival, and he outlined that they do have an ethical sponsorship arrangement, which does prohibit them from taking funding from some of the big companies that often support the arts in Western Australia, and they are the mining companies. So for them, they don't see this $5,000 as replaceable. They see it as impactful in terms of having the money to meet their budget. So that's why that's come back. I guess when I look at this, I also sort of thought about the Mount Hawthorn Festival, $25,000 for a new entity to come in and run that. And perhaps, you know, I'm not quite sure if we've quite got the amount right there and whether that should quite be at the Pride WA level. But this is the amendment as it is, and perhaps if people feel inclined to further consider, we could deal with that as a second amendment. But yeah, just thought I'd outline that particularly for Pride Fair Day, it's not too good to see competition between neighbouring councils, and I just wanted to, though, raise that with you because I think it is significant. We have lost Pride WA from City of Vincent to the Plaza in Northbridge, which you can understand. It's an amazing facility, but to lose all of their activities from Vincent would be quite heartbreaking. So any further comments on the amendment? Councillor Alexander.
Mayor Cole, I support those comments. You know, I think it's a great thing for all the reasons you've said, and it's good for all the people attending Pride. And as you well know, it's a big crowd and it's a good day. And you know, I'm disappointed here the City of Perth were wanting to pinch it, but fully supportive of the amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Alexander. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? I declare that carried. We're back to the substantive. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to propose a further amendment. It would be to reduce the funding allocated to Palace J for the Mount Hawthorn Street Festival to $20,000. And I suppose that would have a knock-on effect of reducing the $10,000 reduction to a $5,000 reduction. I'm not sure how that was actually recorded in the previous amendment, but where needed, can we change that amount to 5,000? If I have a seconder.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Look, the reason that I'm proposing this reduction, I don't like to reduce money that we're allocating to events, but I have some concerns about this event, and I think that the point raised earlier about comparing the amount allocated with some of the other events proposed is a good one. The primary concerns I have is that there hasn't been any consultation with the local town team or the local businesses about this proposed event. I think this has been accepted on face value as a reproduction of a previous Streets and Lanes Festival, which was put on by the Mount Hawthorn Hub. But in looking at the information we've been given and the further information in the briefing notes, I'm not convinced that it is a similar offering, and I'm not convinced that it is an offering that our community is looking for. I do have concerns around the timing of the event, which is proposed to run from 11 or 12 in the day through till 11 p.m. That the provider has seemingly a history of solely providing block party events, which is possibly not the family-friendly event we're looking for in Mount Hawthorn, and that perhaps there's a emphasis on alcohol consumption. The other concern I have is this is an unknown provider and is a commercial provider without any partnership with a community group, and so that gives me some pause. Not enough to recommend that we don't fund the event, but I don't think that it's appropriate for us to allocate the same amount of money to that untested event as we do to very well-established events that attract a large number of people, like Fair Day, the Jazz Festival, the Revelation Film Festival. I mean, where I think that it's something that we could try and see how it goes, but I would be proposing that we reduce that funding. I just remembered there was another part to my amendment which I didn't mention before, and I'm not sure how that can be reflected, and that is to ask for some conditioning to be put on that funding. So I'll seek advice as to whether I can include that now or whether I should just wait and do it a second time around.
Can you maybe just outline to us what it would say, and then we can get some advice for you?
So it would be that the funding be reduced to $20,000, but also be conditioned on further information from the provider as to what they're proposing in more detail, and that requesting that they consult with the Mount Hawthorn Hub and the local businesses before that funding is released.
Through the chair, I think that it would make logical sense to include that as part of the current amendment because it relates to this current amendment. So we'll get that up on the screen shortly. But
Perhaps
is the
Anish
seconder
can-
happy to have that additional form of words added? Yes, the seconder is happy.
to clarify, if you could just repeat the condition.
So that the funding be conditional on more detail being provided around the event to be provided, including what family-friendly options will be offered. And that the provider consult with the Mount Hawthorn Hub and the local businesses to the satisfaction of the city before the funding is released.
Okay, thank you very much, Wendy. Seconder?
Nothing further to add other than, yeah, I guess the main thing that was missing, I felt, was just the evidence of the collaboration with the broader community, specifically the businesses.
Councillors? Oh, look, I support the amendment. sincerely hope that this doesn't prevent the event from happening, because I know there'd be a lot of excitement in the Mount Hawthorn community to see the return of a big event in the streets in Mount Hawthorn. But I think it is important that the demographic of Mount Hawthorn is considered. It is very much a place of many, many families, and that's, I think, why the success of Streets and Lanes worked, is that the Mount Hawthorn hub and the event manager understood that and tailored to that. And I think it's sound to trial this at a lesser level than what we would be giving to some of our major events, and that they're also community run, as Councillor Castle has already outlined. So still hopeful that this will go ahead, and encourage the provider not to see this as a disincentive, but as an opportunity to actually make it really responsive to the demographic and a really successful event, because it tailors to the people who will come out in force. And those who know Mount Hawthorn understand that. So thanks, Councillor Castle. Councillor Alexander?
I'm somewhat intrigued about the process going on here. We've had the Revelation and the Pride, who they're obviously been made aware that they're getting less, and so have made representations to council members or others with regards to getting their money reinstated. We're now having someone having 5,000 taken off them. Were they aware they were getting 25,000, or did they have the opportunity to speak to council members or something before, as had the Revelation people and the Pride people? So, you know, I've got no idea whether the Palace J is a good event or a bad event or otherwise, but there just seems to be two standards being applied here.
The CEO has a response.
Through Mayor Cole, once we published the briefing agenda, so we got all the applications in, they were assessed. Once we had published the briefing agenda on the website, our events officer did email the briefing report with these recommendations to all the event applicants, so they're aware of what was being recommended to council, and that has given them an opportunity to provide feedback and raise any issues or concerns or provide comment, which is what's happened over the last few days.
Yeah, but obviously Palace J were unaware that someone was going to suggest they get less money. So,
well, Councillor Alexander, questions were asked at the last briefing. So if there were any concerns about what was asked at the last briefing, perhaps that could have triggered that they would come in and have a bit more of a discussion. So, yeah. You wish to continue speaking, or?
I just think there's two standards at play here.
Well, that's fair enough. That's you put that on the record. Thank you. Councillors, any further debate on this amendment?
Just a question to administration, whether they support these amendments.
Through Mayor Cole, it's a difficult process for the evaluation panel. $622,000 worth of events funding requested, and our job was to try to make that fit in a budget of $250,000 against trying to meet the criteria set by council for best value for money for the event. So there can be a small change here or there, doesn't really impact. So if, it's the question about the $5,000 reduction and the 5,000. We support that. That's fine.
Councillors, any further debate on the amendment? I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried with Councillor Alexander voting against. So back to the substantive. Councillor Alexander.
Can I just clarify what I'm voting against the Palace J, but I'm voting for?
No, you're voting against reducing the funding by $5,000.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, back to the substantive. I just wanted to mention that we did have a couple of other, it wasn't just those two, we have had others that have approached us. We had Andrew Kalis, who's associated with the Florida Athena Football Club, and the New Year's Eve on the pitch, saying that they would feel that they needed $20,000 to run that New Year's Eve event, given that costs are higher on New Year's Eve, and that if they receive the $10,000, they would opt to run it on a different night. So I guess I have a question to administration is if they received the $10,000 and wanted to run an event on a different night, not on New Year's Eve, would this approval or granting still be able to apply?
Terry Mayor Cole, I think it'd be useful if we could just have a one-line amendment to that report then to note that the funding is provided to the organisation, but with flexibility on
the date.
The venue would stay the same. It'd be, I'm assuming, Little Stadium with Florida Athena Football Club, but with flexibility on a different date.
So we'd need to have an amendment that would say that council approves the New Year's Eve on the pitch event to be held on an alternative date.
Yes, and we'll probably change the name of the event as well.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. And the other one that was raised is that Beaufort Street Network and Reverend Mark Dale have both been in touch about the Christmas festival at the Beaufort Street Christmas Festival, which is held in the grounds of the St Albans Church. And Reverend Mark Dale said he would be grateful if I could make fellow councillors aware that over 90% of those attending, performing, selling and participating at the festival are not members of the church but of the community, and that the St Albans contributes around $4,000 of their members' funds towards the cost of the festival, and that they've had crowds of up to 1,000 at their event. So that has come through, some 2 bits of feedback there. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of all of the feedback received.
Can I just check with Wendy whether she just got the wording of that amendment on the funding for Florida Athena, $10,000 to be able to support an event on an alternate date to be agreed with the city?
Just to clarify that the decision council is making is to allocate funding to these groups for proposed events, but each event will still require a separate event application and approval. So it's not locked in being the New Year's Eve event. There's still discretion for administration to approve it on an alternate date.
Okay, that clarifies that then. Thank you very much. So before we move to a vote on this, I just last call for if anyone would like to reconsider Pride Fair Day even further. Okay, no, all right. I'll put the substantive motion as amended. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously with Councillor Warner, external to the chamber on a financial interest. Okay. Do you want to go home, CFO? Won't have much of administration here. We're running lean tonight. We've all got
we do need we've still got a 2-week sprint to the end of financial year. So
all right,
that's the last.
I've been asked for us to go to 12.3 adoption of the corporate business plan. We are still in this sort of suite, so that makes sense. 2023-24 to 26-27 and the 4-year capex program 23-24 to 26-27. An absolute majority decision is required. Can I please have a mover and seconder for the corporate business plan? Bit tired? Come on, guys. Got to make a long night. Moved by Councillor Apollo, seconded by Councillor Castle. Nothing to say, Councillor Castle?
Supportive of this and thank you for bringing it forward, and just want to say congratulations, Reece, on a successful evening. Thank you for all your hard work.
Councillors, comments on the CBP? I don't think I need to talk about the integrated planning and reporting framework anymore, so I'll pass and just say I'm happy to support this. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? and without any reasons, okay. Okay. All right, item 9.4, outcome of public, thank you very much, CFO. Well done. Outcome of public notice, proposed lease of portion number 41 Britannia Road, Leederville. This is the item that also relates to item 5.1, the receiving of petitions. So can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to speak specifically to the petition, the desire to not have the telecommunications tower located there, I totally appreciate that. And given the choice, I would not put it there either. However, we do need to put a telecommunications tower somewhere because people need to be able to answer their phones. And I get inordinately annoyed when I can't get reception in for my phone, and I imagine other people feel the same way. And when we look at the various locations that were proposed, one up near the basketball courts next to Florida Athena, another one out towards the middle of the oval next to the cricket ground, I would say this is the least worst option for where we can stick this thing. There's a bunch of trees around it that will hide it. The kids will have fun throwing sticks and rocks at the post as well as they're riding around on the pump track. So I do acknowledge that it's not ideal, but it is our best option out of the options that we have available to us. Thank you.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I agree. I think it's probably true to say that no one wants this near their house. I don't accept that there's any health reasons or any significant reasons why it shouldn't be in the location that it is. And I think that to address the petition, we have already explored all possible alternative locations and settled on the best option. So I'm happy to support this as is.
Councillors, perhaps I can speak to this because I did attend 2 site meetings on this with residents. I know that this has been something that Jocelyn, the manager of governance has worked on for a long time. It's about 3 years. Yeah. The last, 3 years this has been in the making. It has been the city's objective to try to find the location of least impact. If you consider at the moment that the telecommunications tower is at the end of Linton Street, overhanging residents over the tops of their houses, and that Linton Street residents have had to put up with a telecommunications tower on their street, immediately, transmitting across them, and with a large tower above them, this is actually a much better impact from a resident's perspective. So if you take that current location versus this, 1,000 times better from a resident perspective. And it's our role as council to consider the impact of all residents in the city of Vincent, whilst acknowledging that when you're moving a telecommunications tower, it's always tricky, and it is always a process where you have to involve the community because they are very tall. Telecommunications towers are, they have equipment on them across different providers. They can add little bits to them, to the monopole. They can't go higher, but from time to time they can add things on, and it can be quite contentious. So when we advertised the Britannia North master plan, we did indicate in there 2 potential locations. They were far worse, in my view, than where they are now. It was right in the middle of our little triangular patch where we have of public open space, where we have the compost with the mulching pile, which is a lovely green space. And it was also looked at to have as originally one of the lighting poles as part of the Lidders Stadium lighting upgrades, or right there on the oval. And given that the oval is a great big green flat expanse, it would have been very obvious for anyone just recreating and using Britannia Reserve would have been quite visual. So we took the opportunity to meet with a group of residents who live along Britannia Road and nearby. They contacted us. It was in no way intended to be an exclusive meeting. We just basically worked with the groups that came to us. We sort of gave one of the residents the opportunity to be the lead contact, and we met with them to hear their concerns. We talked to them about the fact that we're going to try to bury this as much as possible behind the new Litter Stadium change rooms, and that with the tree canopy there, that we would have the best chance of camouflage and the greatest distance from residential homes. And in terms of the meetings that we had, by the time we got to the second meeting where we had confirmed with them that this location was viable and we would go ahead with it, those residents that we met with at that time were satisfied. They still didn't love the fact that a telecommunications tower was anywhere near their homes, but they accepted that we had gone to some lengths to really try to do our best in terms of the location. So just in considering this, think of the Linton Street residents now, and think of this location proposed. And the fact is, we've really tried to engage in face-to-face meetings with the residents that contacted us on this. Councillors, any further comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Item 11.9, proposal to hold events at Leederville Oval. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Hallett.
I'm supportive of the item.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Yes, supportive of it with the caveat of the conditions that have been put in there that around admin confirming that events proposed will be in line with our public health plan.
Thank you. Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Apollo.
Just a question, please. Under 1.5, it says the event activities should not be focused on the consumption of alcohol, but then it says alcohol advertising, marketing promotion shall be limited. So can you just clarify what what this license will allow in terms of large events with alcohol consumption? Thank you.
Through Mayor Cole, the Executive Director's online.
Thanks, Councillor Apollo. Through you, Mayor Cole. The requirement is that the events, basically, they're not titled and based around alcohol consumption. So they're not going to be a beer and wine festival, for instance. They'd be based around family events and family focus. They wouldn't be promoting alcohol as part of their marketing. That doesn't mean that alcohol can't be consumed, but if they're a family-friendly and a family-based event, then our view is that alcohol won't be consumed at the volumes that it would be if it was an alcohol based event. And the second part to this is that this will be a bit of trial and error. We will, I'm sure, have some events where there will be some issues, and we will then need to change our approach and our management measure and work with the event organisers to make sure that any of those issues don't continue in future events.
Just one follow-up question, if I may. Just so does council need to approve each event, or is it a blanket approval for the period? Just to because the community might not be supportive of a New Year's Eve rave, to 3 a.m. So I just want to know what we're actually, what the authorization is here in terms of how we can regulate what we might consider appropriate for the location and residents that live within a 2 to 3 block radius.
So the recommendation through your Mayor Cole is for council to approve a licence, not to approve each individual event, and that licence will have conditions, including those set out in the key terms, which basically require it to comply with the public health plan and those provisions around alcohol, as well as requirements in relation to notifying surrounding residents. Each event would require an application to the city and consultation is probably the wrong word, notification of surrounding residents, as well as security management plans and similar management plans, other management plans as well. That will be determined by administration in the normal way that we assess and approve event applications at the city.
Councillors, any further comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. That takes us to item 12.2, outcome of advertising and adoption of amendments to legal representation for council members and employees policy. Can I have a? Sorry? Oh, sorry. Yes, I accidentally crossed it out, but then I drew an arrow next to it to indicate to myself that we needed to deal with that. I will go to that one. Annual review of council delegations, which is item 12.1. Absolute majority decision required on this item. Can I please have a mover and seconder on this item? Moved by Councillor Loden, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Castle. Councillor Loden.
I'm supportive of the officer recommendation.
Councillor Castle. Councillors, look, I asked some questions about this at the last meeting. They've been responded to in the briefing notes and I'm satisfied now. So thank you very much for that, Manager. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Back to item 12.2, outcome of advertising and adoption of amendments to legal representation for council members and employees policy. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Somebody called this out. Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Hallett.
It wasn't me. I'm supportive.
Councillor Hallett.
Supportive.
Councillors. Okay, I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Hallett, Councillor Apollo voting against, but that has passed. That leaves only the confidential item to consider. We have had an indication there's a question on that item. So I will need a motion for.
I did clarify with the council what the question was, and the question isn't confidential.
Okay, that's fine.
If,
Great. Does anyone wish to ask any confidential questions? And that would go to who the applicant is, for example.
Through Mayor Cole, the question was why this report's coming to council, and I clarified with the councillor that the director roles at the city are something that's classified under the Local Government Act as a senior designated employee, and the Local Government Act stipulates that council must endorse the appointment or dismissal of positions which are in quote senior designated employees, and this is one of those positions.
So it is a confidential item, but I'm just seeking from you, is there intending to be any further questions or debate? Because we can move behind closed doors, but if not, and it's just a matter of moving and seconding and adopting, then we can proceed. Okay, all right, so it is a confidential item, but we don't intend to have confidential debate or confidential questions. So we're dealing with item 7.1, appointment of Executive Director, Infrastructure and Environment 2023. Could I please have a mover and seconder for this item? It's moved by Councillor Castle, seconded by Councillor Hallett. Councillors, any comments? Just to note that this was that we did have a confidential session last week and questions were asked of the CEO and replies were given. So thank you very much for that, CEO. If there are no further comments or questions, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Well, that concludes our business for tonight's council agenda. It has been a big one with the adoption of the annual budget. So I'd like to thank all of you for your participation, and thank you to administration and to the community members for attending. Greg, you've performed a marathon by sticking with us this evening. So I'd like to say thank you all and close the meeting at 9:17 p.m.